Welcome, everyone, to the September 7th Planning Workshop for the Medfield Board of Selectmen. This is actually a rare event. We haven't had that many workshops. I can only assume that because it's a workshop, we're expected to get some work done tonight. And so we have two main topics we're going to be talking about. We'll be discussing the town administrator's goals, and we'll also be talking about the overall town goals for FY 2022 to 23. I would just make sure everyone's aware that we are video recording this meeting. So for those in the audience, once again, if you have comments, we'd ask you to use the microphone, which I trust we have the microphone. It's over there. So the Bill Massara Memorial microphone is in fact right where it belongs, in the middle of the seats. And Medfield TV is live streaming. You guys are all veterans, so you know that the microphone isn't so we can hear you better. It's so that the people watching on TV can hear you better. And I think with this workshop, we jump right into this. The first item we have is a discussion and a vote on the town administrator's FY 2023 goals. Christine, I don't know if you have any preparatory comments or anything?
No, I think I reviewed them with you at the last meeting,
Right.
and you were going to take what I had presented, go back and add to it, take off from it, and give your recommendations.
So we'll start with you, Eileen.
All right, so if we look at, we'll do it goal by goal instead of going all at once. Yes.
Yeah, why don't we do
Yeah.
why don't we do at least major goals?
Yeah,
Yeah, let's do that. That's a better way. That's a better way to do it. Yep.
because I do like that, we were talking about this yesterday or day before, about, the public interaction and participation. So the idea of developing a town meeting 101 session, seeing that we didn't get quorum this past year, and there's a lot of confusion as to, and there's a lot of new people in town, that the idea of trying to educate everyone on the process and why we do it and how important it is, I love that. So I'm eager to learn more about how that's going to be implemented. I see that you're going to be working with Scott on that.
Mm-hmm.
The town administrator monthly office hours, do you not have that today?
I had it yesterday.
No, I mean, technically, have you not had that before, or is that something you've always had?
No, I have an open door policy. I don't have any set office hours, so one of the things I was thinking about was going to, making it more formalized at the election, but then going to businesses throughout every month, picking a different business so that people who are out and about and might not necessarily be at the town hall would have a chance to chat.
Good, I love that. And then just the idea of the monthly written reports, I think is helpful, just having my sales days. It's always good, you can go back and you have a written trail instead of having to look at YouTubes and following up in these meetings, so I think that's always helpful, so.
Okay. Pete?
I think all of these are excellent, Christine. Committee handbook is needed. The town meeting 101, I'm not exactly sure what that'll look like, but I think it's a great idea. I'm always concerned because when we go to town meeting that the people at the front of the room just have so much more information than the people that are attending the town meeting that haven't been able to do all the pre-meetings.
So I think this is a little more basic than that, and
Yeah, I know.
it's going to be geared towards people who have moved to town recently or may have been here for a while and didn't grow up in New England, who aren't familiar with the town meeting form of government. So it's going to be more of start off more as a basic introduction as to what town meeting is, why it is, the history of town meeting. And then depending on that success, we have some plans to build off of that in the coming years with some other different departments doing some education as well.
Well, it's going to be important, if you don't mind me chiming in, that, if you've got friends that live in Wellesley, in Walpole, in different towns, they have different town meetings.
Right.
So I think it's going to be important to let people know, why certain towns have what they have and why we are the way we are.
Because we're the best.
It's a reason to move here.
Right, I mean,
I think the monthly office hours are an excellent idea. I think that even if, just putting it out there that people know that that's available to them, I think is a very good thing. And I just love the idea of monthly written reports so that people in town can know what you think the important issues are that are, I think that's a great thing to start, so, great.
So I think these are all fine. I had just a couple of questions to make sure I understood what we actually were trying to do. The first one around finalizing committee handbook, given that you've already done a lot, what addition, and if I've already asked this question, I'll apologize for asking it 2 weeks ago, but I didn't write it down until I get ready for this. What do you see as the future, you know, the continuing requirements beyond what we've already put out or
So
put
right,
together.
what we've done so far has been fairly basic in making sure that the town clerk hands out conflict of interest forms.
Mhm.
We make sure they take their ethics test. What we don't give boards and committees is actually what their roles and responsibilities are. So that's the actual committee handbook that we are working on. You know, why do you have an executive session? So taking all of the information about meetings and minutes and
Got
public
it,
records
okay.
requests and putting that in there so that people are aware of what their actual roles and responsibilities are.
So that's kind of like the uniform roles and responsibilities of being on a committee as
Mhm.
opposed to the charter that'll give us specific committee roles and
Correct.
responsibility, or at least responsibilities and outputs.
Right.
Got it,
Yeah,
okay.
no, this is a little more general and a roadmap to being on a committee.
Okay. And not to change your goal, but the Town Meeting 101, I hadn't, until just now, I hadn't appreciated that was more just explaining
Mhm.
what a New England town meeting or a New England town meeting at Medfield's all about. Depending on a couple of years ago, you recall when we were actually looking at the overrides, we ran a couple of informational
Mhm.
meetings. And then the year after we did two, depending on what the agenda for the town meeting is, I thought those were very useful meetings. So not trying to add a goal or redefine the goal you chose, but when we get there, I think there would be some value to having some informational meetings for people who do understand the town meeting process, but don't necessarily, either they don't have the time, they won't have the time to ask the questions about the articles that they really have at town meeting without burying us, or they just flat out don't understand the articles at all and they'd like to better grasp what they're all about. So I thought those worked pretty well for 2 years, but it was sort of uncoordinated, and probably more than anything, I probably prompted those two. And second year was a little rougher than the first year, partly because I wasn't quite as far out in front of it. So if we thought about it, and I'd feel better if we actually had, for that kind of thing, a warrant committee, town moderator.
It would have been more of a panel.
So
Yep.
it's a bit more of a shared thing.
So just to touch on that, that
Yep.
is when we started creating the town meeting websites. So each town meeting that we have, whether it's an annual or a special, has the articles that we're going to be addressing that evening and has all of the background information, similar to what you were speaking about, Pete, that we have a lot of information up on that stage. We try to push that out on the website so people can be informed about the issues before they get to town meeting. History of whatever the issue is we're taking up that night.
Probably the biggest one that is sort of impossible to get done on a website and also impossible to process at a town meeting is the budget.
100%.
And that's where people, it's like, you have to sort of distill the budget down, not to 55 lines with cryptic codes, but we're rather a way of summarizing the budget and where it's growing in a way that people can get their arms around the chunks of the budget and what those trends are. So that was, I think, where a lot of the work went in on the ones we did. And then the only other item I had on the monthly written reports, I think I've already stated this, is I wouldn't want that to become a bureaucratic burden, being a lengthy report. This is something that should be concise, focused, and hit the high points, but not turn into a half day, a month of writing on your part.
Thank you.
And are you having your department heads actually do their summaries? So literally, it's like, that's what I used to do with my reps, right? Tell me what you did, and I'll tell my boss what I did, because you did it for me.
I had a meeting, a department head meeting today, and I explained it to them as you're providing me with 2 or 3 snippets of information that you want to get out there. We need to be responsible for having our own public relations and talking about the projects that we're doing that we think might just be everyday projects, but people aren't aware what's going on. So,
Right.
yes, so they will be doing that as well. Good.
Great. Thanks, Cole.
All right, so, again, you and I have had a chance to have the one-off where I think it's phenomenal that sometimes people assume that departments get a chance to sync, and making sure that whether it be the town departments and the public schools and the municipalities, that there is an opportunity to make sure there is cooperation. Now, let me ask you a quick question here on opportunities for the Human Services Department. Is that Kathy's? No.
No, so that is a proposal to take what we consider some of our human services department, which would be outreach. We're looking at, so Kathy's public health nurse, veterans, council on aging, and bring that into one department so that there's more working together in a formalized environment.
And is that hiring somebody to oversee that, or is that letting somebody today kind of take the lead that's already in a position?
We are investigating both, but at this point, I'd be looking at doing an internal promotion for that with existing staff.
Okay. And then I know over the last few months for me here, we've talked about open space and trying to make sure that we are identifying pieces of property in town that residents should be aware is open space, open to them. Is that part of what's going on here with identifying the responsibilities for grounds and open space parcels?
Yes, one of the things we're doing and working on the open space proposal that was, I believe they're due back tomorrow, is identifying all of our open space parcels, who's responsible for management, and then we'll be reviewing that internally to find out what is the most efficient way to be handling that.
Okay.
So that's separate from our open space parcels, and then we have our building and ground parcels, which I deem as Dwight Derby House, Library, Town Hall, Council on Aging.
I think, and once you do that, if that can be put up on the town website, I think that would be awesome. So when people go into the Dwight Derby House, they know who's managing that. Baker Pond, certain areas, I think that would be super helpful. Again, if somebody new coming into town, they just look at it as town property, but they wouldn't know where to go other than to you.
And they can see me at my monthly office hours, just saying.
Well, that might be longer than 1 hour now.
Okay. Pete?
And ideally, we'd have QR codes at all of those different spaces around town, so that when you got there, you could just scan your QR code and get the town information about that particular spot, the trail map, the information, whatever other information the town has about it. So I think these are excellent goals again.
And I'm fine with Mazal as well. I think you explained I think I'd asked this question before about the all identified locations. My head being as twisted as it is, said, what about the unidentified? But I think we're clear on that. The intent is to try to address all, if there's some little, I don't know that we're talking about the little traffic islands that the Medfield Garden Club takes care of, but at least all significant locations. So that sounds fine for me. Third goal, would it help if I read these? Because people that are listening in, they probably don't know what these are, so they probably can't piece them together from our comments. Third goal is continue to manage town finances in a fiscally prudent manner that strikes a proper balance between the funding of important town services and affordability for taxpayers. There are then, I should read off of here because I'm reading off my draft from 2 weeks ago. One part of that is to present a final ARPA project plan. Second, submit FY 2023 budget for approval to the Government Finance Officers Association. That's the issue of formatting the budget in a way that makes it friendly. So we've had this Government Finance Officers Association helping us figure out how to format a budget document that's kind of consumer friendly. So that's why we're submitting it somewhere. Capital plan presented to the BOS prior to December 1st, 2022. Annual grant funding report to the BOS. We have a lot of grants that come in. And then continue to work with and support the new elementary school project committee.
So my comments on that, that's spot on. I mean, I know you work prudently already, but just to kind of highlight again so the citizens can see where you're focusing on the things that need to be delivered. I mean, we were just talking about the ARPA project the other day, right? So there's a long list of opportunities, so I'm good.
Okay. Pete?
So I think these again are good things for you to be focusing on, Chris. In terms of the ARPA project, do you have a figure that you can just kind of share off the top of your head as to how much money is still available to the town?
So we currently have,
Ballpark.
let's see, before the fiscal year 24 capital budget, which we had intended using ARPA funding for, we would have 1.3.
And that includes all the money that the county's been withholding from us?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we put forward the money that we intended for the fiscal year 24 and the fiscal year 25 capital budget, that would leave us with the flexible spending of $45,000, and that's our direct allocation, which was the 1.3 from the Treasury.
Okay,
In
so
terms
most
of
it's-
Norfolk County, what we have spent to date with the recommendations that we've talked about would leave us with approximately $1.4 million with the much less flexible spending from Norfolk County.
1.1 that we
One
haven't
point four.
allocated for things yet?
No, out of the Norfolk County, you have allocated, the PFAS feasibility study, the Hinckley Playground improvements. We are recommending, wastewater treatment plant improvements and a water rate, study model, so approximately $1 million so far that we have either spent or recommended.
How much is left then that we haven't designated for
Haven't
something?
spent, you have 1.4.
1.4, okay. And that has to be spent by when?
You have to have projects committed by December of 2023. Final expenditures have to be done by early 2026, I believe.
Okay. All right. In terms of the annual grant funding report, that's the thing that you gave us on your, when you did the review, I think you
Mhm.
included that. That's the sort of thing you're envisioning for that?
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
in
That's good.
a more formalized presentation
Yeah, that's
to
very
you
helpful.
about. And should highlight the department heads. A lot of the grants that they work on didn't even show up on the list that are, at the administrative office filled. It's important for you to know what they're coming in as grants outside of the budget as well.
Yep, and then the last one, the supporting the elementary school project, that's the one that's tricky in terms of how do we do that, basically. So we all want to do that, but how do we do that? So that's to be determined, I guess, as we move forward. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
So the first four I was fine with, the fifth one, kind of for the reason piece. I'm not gonna fall on my sword in this, it's one of five on this goal, but I'll make some observations. And I don't remember whether I mentioned this in the last meeting, the one goal I would have liked to have seen here was to develop a set of what I think of as taxpayer metrics. And I think, I don't know if I explained it or not, I might have just explained it in my head, but we get into conversations about what this town can afford. And every time we say, what can people afford, up till now, the answer has been, well, they'll let us know. They won't vote for something if and that's the whole thing we have on affordability. And then we sit there and we do comparisons to other towns and talk about how things are comparable and how much we spend. And we have a legislature that, you've heard this from me before, that thinks we can just continue to underfund growth in Chapter 70 funds for this town because you're all so affluent, you can take it out of your back pocket. And we are compared to other affluent towns, most of which, if not all of them, most of which, because we've also compared to Dover and Sherborne, they're probably in the same ballpark as we are with diversification of their tax base. But most of the towns that have these high-cost schools, that money is not coming from the private property, homeowners in that town. And what I'm trying to get at, what I would like to get to, is not merely how much do we spend, but how much do the actual homeowners in this town have to contribute to that? And let's start comparing that with all these other towns that the legislature thinks are, we're so affluent, they don't need to provide Chapter 70 funds. That's where I'm going with this, is I'm trying to build the political argument to start to buck the legislature's continued trends to simply shortchange us year after year. It's gone down. When I did the analysis a couple of years back, at one point when I first started, like FY 2009, the state provided 30% of our town's total budget. In 2018, FY 18, it was down to 20%. Very methodically went down 1% a year. It wasn't all Chapter 70, but most of it, a good part of it was. And I'm trying to figure out a way to fight that. Because right now, the perception is you all are rich. You can take it out of your back pocket. And once your schools sink down to the level of mediocrity, then we, the state, will come in and try to help you dig out of the hole. And I'd rather not go there before we fix the problem. So that's a metric that I would like to see us figure out a way to get our handle on. And part of that metric might also be historic trends in budget growth, or whatever the trends are, for major components of our budget. I'm not talking about every line, major components. We went through several years after we built the high school where the total debt that we were covering, the debt servicing number, was declining. So the taxes weren't going up as fast as the operating expenses were going up because the debt was basically deflating what that growth rate was. And I wasn't even smart, it was when I was first on the warrant committee, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out back then. But now we're looking at a period of time when we may be going back into loading back up on debt. So suddenly all that stuff that got hidden or blunted, that's all gonna come back, roaring back. And we need to get out in front of that. So that's the goal I was preferring there. As far as working with this is a style thing for goals, the issue of continuing to work with and support the new elementary school project committee, that's a directional goal, and I after last year's goals, some of which were directional, I went and looked at this with a more objective clinical view that said, okay, continuing to work, that's pretty easy to get that done. Just don't refuse to show up at the meetings and you probably will get that one done. So the real point.
Wait, is that an option? No, sorry.
And I'm not saying you need to guarantee that you'll get a project through by the end of the fiscal year. So there's a hard and fast objective measure here that you are not really in control of. So I'm happy to leave it there. At the end of the year, we're gonna talk about, yep, Christine showed up at the meetings of the building committee, and so we give her a check on that. But I'm looking, generally speaking, for goals that are objective, that, you can kind of.
Right, more actionable.
Yeah. I'll throw you a bone on this one to just continue working, that's fine, but, because who knows where this is going, but, in general, I think when we do goals, it's better to have fewer goals that have hard outputs than multiple goals that are sort of either sentiment or direction without really knowing what the milestones are.
Well, and I think the only thing I'd say is, since we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, we know we want a school, right? So you can check that box off. But there could be some curveballs, like we still haven't heard back from the state, right? And knowing what Christine, Nick, Brittany have done behind the scenes for a lot of things that have been involved with the school and all those meetings. I don't look at that as you just try to put a deliverable. It's that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that our town administrator does on behalf of the school department behind the scenes. Even just some of the communication, I can call her and say, have you had a chance to touch base with Jeff, blah, 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 and I can get an update on what's happening. So I look at that as she's going to do it. It takes time out of her day, so I certainly wanted to be credited for it.
Well, so the way I would look at these goals, these are sort of, this is just me.
Yep.
But the goals like this, which are looking into the crystal ball at the beginning of a fiscal year without knowing what chaos will be created in the coming year, there's the sort of things that are the normal job that a person in Christine's position would do, one of which would be to stay on top of a project like this. And then there's the exceptional specific things that we want her to do. I think this year when we get to the performance evaluation, we'll look at what goals we conjured up a year ago, and it'll be fun to see what the compiled results were. But, it may be that the total set of goals weren't all achieved. But for good reason, because there were these bunch of other things that were far more important that we didn't know were coming. And fortunately, Christine had the common sense to realize these other things that we didn't anticipate were more important. And we're glad you did them. And therefore, if you fell short on some specific goal that we imprecisely predicted, who cares? And that's kind of, so I look at this as sort of a one-off. This is almost like catalytic action drivers that, when you really want to push something specific in a particular direction, this is useful. But then there's the job description, which is, in my view, actually more important, but hard to be objective about.
I don't see leash law in here anywhere. Do we want to stay away from that?
No. Oh, yes.
Hold on. No,
I guess we won't be able to vote on these goals until the last goal is to provide support.
Before you go on to that one, I just had a comment about this one that we were on. Your addition of the taxpayer metrics, I like that idea. I think that's very imprecise and difficult to define how that's gonna be.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It's a difficult thing to measure Chris against, but,
But I think maybe not putting it in as goal, but it's something I can start working on now with the financial team, and we can sit down and work together and see if we're headed in the right direction of exactly what you're looking for. Because I don't know exactly, we need to define or refine what you're looking for a little bit more on what information's available.
I know what
that's
was in
fine.
my head, which is probably not very good, but it was, all I needed was the database of the average tax the average tax in a particular town and the percentage of the total tax base that's paid for out of residential taxes. So you basically take that percentage and apply it to the average tax to normalize the amount that individual homeowners contribute to the operation of their town. That's what I need, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. You can find the average tax. I didn't immediately find the spot that has what percent of the total tax levy is funded by, and I'm sure it's there,
Yeah, I think
I
we even
I think we
talked
have
about
that.
it prior
We
to the
talked
town
about it.
meeting, because we were
Yeah.
talking about certain towns, even though they have business, they still tax business at the same rate that they tax
Right.
residents, because it's.
Well,
otherwise
there's
you're-
that, but then there's also the sheer distribution. If you go to Lexington and you look at what percentage of their tax levy is paid for by their homeowners, it's a whole lot less than ours because they have a big tax base. If you go to Cambridge, if Mike Sullivan was right with all his comments, they have such an endowment built up that even though it's, they're a really expensive town in a sense, but if you look at the kind of support they get from the state,
Gotcha.
you look at how much money they have I don't think they've even tapped out their Prop 2.5 limits.
No.
That's
no.
how, so
They-
there's some towns that can do that.
Yeah, Cambridge, Lawrence, they get huge support
Right.
for Chapter 70 monies.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm trying to construct the argument that gets us to a political position where we can fight this rather than just wait for it all to happen until it becomes a disaster.
I know that I've come across a database that compares certain metrics in different towns, and I found it very interesting. I think it might have been the Pioneer Institute that has that, but it's, and so that probably those sorts of metrics that you're talking about are probably ones that they have, but.
I'm just looking for a counter argument to the current prevailing viewpoint about the funding that comes to Medfield. That's simple.
Yeah, I think that's a problem of the number of state representatives that are from cities versus the ones that are from towns, so.
But
we're
we got
just-
two. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
but
that's a
that's-
piece of it, Pete, for sure, is that the cities have bigger issues and bigger lots of everything, and it's probably even worse if we were way out in
well,
western
and
Massachusetts.
they team up together and
Right.
take more money for themselves,
Right.
so.
So anyway, that's that.
Okay.
The last goal, provide support for implementing economic development initiatives and promote local businesses. And actually provide support for implementing economic development initiatives, promote local businesses. One sub-goal is a written Board of Selectmen policy for liquor licenses.
So we have a lot of businesses that will come to us and they're looking to either open a business in town, expand the business they have, and they have to go to 5 or 6 different departments within the town hall. And one of the main one they always come to us about is liquor licenses. And we don't have anything written to give to anybody when they come to us to say, this is the process you need to follow. And there's a very set process by the state, and we do have some local regulations as well, but we have nothing to give them. So they end up having a conversation with us and taking notes. So we're looking at trying to make not only a set policy for you to be able to give to people, but a checklist for us to put together to give to somebody to make the process just easier when they're coming to do business with us.
We should have one-stop shopping for businesses coming to town
Yes.
hall
We send them all to Sarah.
Aha.
yeah.
Should we start with Sarah?
And hopefully the ZBA, because occasionally the ZBA has to permit a new
Right.
business use. And,
Yep.
and when I was on the ZBA, it was just the luck of the draw as to how long it took that applicant to get their decision back, because all the volunteers on the ZBA were writing the decisions, and sometimes it took months, unfortunately.
Do we limit
think
how many
that- I
liquor
think that-
license?
We're limited by the state.
Okay, so have we capped our,
We still have some available.
oh, we do, okay.
Wouldn't want to slow that process down. All right.
Can we get him to stay open past 9?
Nick would have very much appreciated that last week.
So, okay, well, my question was, is this focused on one-day type, but it's not.
That's part of it as well.
Part of it.
In doing some of the research we've had for businesses that have been looking for 1 days, there's a maximum number of 1 days you can have per year, and some of the businesses weren't aware of that as well. So it's just trying to make sure everybody has the same information, and we treat everybody the same when they come in looking for those licenses. So, and then I did not fill out any more on these. I only left one because I assumed you would have additional goals to add to this or things that you wanted to see. So I didn't give you a 4 or 5 page list because I assumed you would add to it.
jumped in front of you. Any further comments on
On that last goal?
the? Yeah.
No, no, I think it, you know, it could be filled out clearly with more initiatives.
Yeah, I found the focus on liquor licenses kind of intriguing, but now that I understand the rationale, I'm good with that. On this one, I did have another goal, and it probably is not, it probably has too many words, as opposed to too few. It seems to me that a good goal in this area should focus on balancing commercial attractiveness of the downtown and expanded public access in the downtown area. So what I'm trying to get out in front of, in my thinking at least, is on one hand, we're promoting economic development in the downtown area. We've been making some progress. We've got some nice restaurants that have moved in. There's more just activity that's drawing people into the downtown. We have things like the Complete Streets Initiative, which are actually designed to make it easier for people who want to go downtown without necessarily having to get in a car and drive somewhere. But at the same time, we've had a long-term reputation as a town, justified or not, as being a difficult town to deal with. So I also would like to see us find ways to be more receptive and flexible when it comes to downtown economic development. So if someone wants to come in and do something, I'd prefer them not to see it as assumption that the first step will be an obstacle to simply get started. Perhaps the liquor license issue will be one step in that direction, but there's more than that. What I'm getting at, though, is that on one hand, we're trying to draw more people downtown to expand our economic base. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of blowback from people about how hard it is to get through the downtown and the traffic and all these different things. And it's like those two are in competition. There has to be a way for us to figure out how to do both of those things. But if we're not being proactive and thoughtful about it, the way we'll figure out what we need to do is as a function of who gets hurt on their bicycle trying to get across 109, or how many traffic accidents do we have, or how many people just say, I don't go to Medfield for restaurants. Their food's great, but their parking is crappy. So a goal that sort of starts to look at that, I think, would be helpful. We had a goal that in the town goals that actually I think maybe will go away, but at the time when we had the Downtown Economic Development Committee and the second committee that had almost the same name, but it was actually something different. And they I think they just wanted to quit. They got tired of not getting anywhere. And at one point in the goals, we said we were going to form a new committee to kind of do the responsibility of all those things. I don't know whether we need a committee, because the committees we've had don't necessarily seem to have exactly gotten the job done quite the way we'd like. But that idea of bringing what those committees were intended to help do, which was to figure out how best to develop the downtown and make it easy to do it and make the downtown accessible, that's the thinking that I'm talking about in that goal.
Yeah, I would agree with that, absolutely, that we haven't had any entity focusing on the downtown since the Downtown Study Committee and the Economic Development Committee ceased to exist. And it would be good to somehow recreate that focus on the downtown. I think that we should be encouraging the increase in the business district, select certain parcels that can be added so that they can become stores, if they're adjacent to the existing shopping areas. The UCC Church owns the parcel on Pleasant Street behind the church, and they're looking to do something with that. I mean, it's zoned residential. It would make a lot of sense for it to be zoned business and let them do something in terms of a business use there. It would make it a lot more valuable for them. But that sort of situation, somebody should be looking at those opportunities. We want more stores in the downtown, I think, because we have such a limited space for the stores, and we have so many banks that are occupying them.
The third piece of that, so it's economic development, public access, and the third piece is infrastructure. We've had people that have said, well, we want underground utilities, we want fancy sidewalks, and it's like, there may be an economic argument for doing that in the context of economic development and public access, But right now, those arguments are being thrown out there by people who tend to live in the downtown, who would really like underground utilities and nice sidewalks. And the cost of those things is, as to do that, to make the people who live downtown happy, probably will prove to be prohibitive for the town if there's no underlying economic justification or more comprehensive rationale for doing it.
Yeah, I'd be concerned that the residents wouldn't support that because of the cost, the high cost of doing it.
Which is
I mean, it'll make the
precisely-
downtown much nicer, I agree visually,
Right.
but it is so expensive.
Well, and then even expanding it. I mean, I live in the RU, right? So expanding the piece of property that you're talking about right now, that's right behind the UCC. All I'd be concerned about is, because there's a neighbor next to that, right? And we just went through in town where people were concerned with people building in property, right? So I'll even simply call out Hinckley South. We had neighbors that suddenly had a piece of property next to them and said, wait, time out, be careful. I want to say the same thing. I've got residents that live in the RU, and they have a home that's been a home for hundreds of years. How do we make sure that if something is done to that building, it's done so those neighbors are protected and it's not something loud and obnoxious and now it's suddenly next to them? They only may be one building away from the main street, but they are one building away and it's today's zone residential. So I'm not opposed to seeing what we can do, but it is going to be 110% with making sure that that section of town has a say. As even if you try to build up trying to get to town, like I walk my dog up Pleasant Street, and that can be a bugger to go because people park on the sidewalks, and I get it, but now you're being forced to walk on the street. So when we look at these things, it is a big discussion about how best we do it so that we're making it accessible, but we're also not putting people in danger, that they're being forced out to walk
Well,
on the street
and
instead of walking the
in
sidewalk.
terms of imposing on people, I think you start a discussion with them.
Yeah.
You go out before you build it.
Well, and we think about too,
That
like,
was
what
the
are we
problem with
looking for?
Hinckley South, the town, basically created the plan and before it went to the neighborhood.
Well, and I think it's too, like, what would be the ideal type of businesses that we're missing? Like, I'm not saying this in any other way, like do we need another pizza shop? Do we need another nail? What are the things that we need and don't need? What are we lacking? And that's a questionnaire out to the community. What type of things could we be saying, what do we need? What are we missing? And then start driving those kind of conversations. But I don't disagree. This town, we are hampered by not having a lot of commercial revenue. I mean, it's one of the things that it's wildly unfortunate, but it is what it is. So how do we change that?
So let me take this, go back and come up with 3 or 4 based on the items that you've talked about tonight and add those in there for your discussion next week.
All right. So we'll defer the actual vote, but I think
we're
we're
good.
comfortable that this is going in the right direction. It's just a couple of changes and based on the comments we've had, and we should be good to go. Are there any comments from the audience? I haven't popped open I should have done this.
I didn't see any red.
Participants in Q&A.
No.
But are there any requests of the town administrator for goals for this upcoming fiscal, or this current fiscal year, I should say, not upcoming? Don't see any hands or questions. Oops, there we go. Well, I was looking over here. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Chris Potts, 7 Kerr Street. I just had one question/suggestion for Christine. With all the committees that we have in town, do you have a decent database of everyone's email addresses who's on the committee? Like a master database?
Yes and no.
Okay. I'm just wondering whether it's, it seems like there's been a lot of conversation. Even tonight, one of our friends stopped by, who was very active in town. We were just talking about just volunteerism in general in the town. And I'm just wondering if it's worth doing some kind of a general survey of all of our committee members, board members, just to gather some information about, why do you volunteer? How could your volunteer experience be improved? What suggestions would you offer to get more people involved? And just try and maybe engage some people who are already serving in the thought process of how do we get more engagement. I'd be happy to work with you on it too. Christine, I've done this before, so
Excellent, thank you.
that's just an
That's up
idea.
to the board.
I'm fine with that. If you're willing to volunteer to help work with Christine to do that, I'm okay with it. Sure.
Yeah.
Pete?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. Nothing like people with suggestions being volunteered to do, follow up on their suggestion. That's kind of,
I think the only thing I didn't want to make a big job, too big of a job for Christine if she doesn't have a good database to start with.
who's doing this?
Could be me, I just had to restart. so-
Okay, that's what I thought. Well, I think that's a valid question, because if you, and I say this to anyone who knows my background in town, when I was on Parks and Rec, I had a not-so-great experience where I did a lot of work and then got stiff-armed. After all my work, after being, told my group was a bunch of bozos, I'm like, fine, call me a bozo, but if I come back and I do what you asked me to do, you're still gonna call me a bozo. And it was like, well, no, but we're not gonna support everything you just did. I'm like, okay, well, then I don't need to do any more volunteer in town. And that's where I stepped away in like 2006 or 2007, with, I'm giving all my time, I'm traveling around the world, and I'm trying to do things for the town, and I kind of wasted my time. So that is something I'm wildly protective of right now. When I see young people in this town step up, and you know this before I even got elected, that when I see young people in this town and they are giving their time and they don't have to, I will trip over myself to make sure that if they have a question that needs to be answered, if they need to find out what needs to be done to make a process smoother, whatever, we are here for that. We are not here to make it difficult. So I think, finding out from people who are on committees, what did you enjoy? What could the town be doing better maybe to make it more encouraging for people to join? Because everyone asks me, do you like your selectman's role? I'm like, I love it. I'm meeting fabulous people. We have great support staff. Everything that I've needed since the day I've come into this, I can turn and say, so-and-so, can you help me with this? And it's been phenomenal. And so I look out and I think, I look at, you two ladies right there in the second row, the front row. You've been doing this for years, right? And I look to some of the young ladies that are doing things in town, and I hope that they're sitting across from me in 20 years because they've had a great experience, they've been supported. So that type of survey, I think, is essential, so we can continue to draw on a lot of the young blood that's in town.
I think one of the things that jumped out at me was just seeing some of the long-term committee board members who are dropping off of boards and wishing that we could reach out to them and say, what kind of, insights would you have before you, move out of town or depart or do something else.
I think, you make a good point too. I go back to the point in time when I was one of the young people who showed up in town 25 years ago, and I look back on that, and it's interesting because now I'm in the opposite side because of mainly because having been invited to be on the warrant committee for 6 years, and then that's kind of how I got into the flow. But when I first got here, you're busy with family, so part of it is I don't have bandwidth. But the other part of it was you have a feeling that there's this bunch of people that know they're involved in what's going on. It's not immediately apparent they're all that interested in what you think. And it's, now that I look at it from this perspective, it's got nothing to do with not being interested in what you think. It's that probably I don't know who you are. I don't necessarily have had a chance to have talked to you necessarily. And so what looks like a barrier is just kind of like there's no connection. Mm-hmm. And which is one of the reasons that, like, for the Hinckley Helpers, I guess I have a similar reaction to you. It's like these are some young parents in town that are stepping forward. That's a hugely good thing. So maybe part of that survey also takes a look at people that have been around a long time that are dropping off, or maybe not so much the ones that are dropping off, but the ones that are doing some of the heavy lifting. And then there's another group that's some of the newest people, and maybe there's even some people that would be happy to help. It's just that I don't know what to do. First time I ever filled out the little form at the back of the warrant report, said I'd do it. Everyone said, oh, this guy's got a real good background, and then I didn't hear anything for 5 years. so
We probably have it in file.
You probably do, yeah, it's probably in file somewhere, because my neighbor said, yeah, they brought your name up. They said you have a really impressive background. And then it wasn't until Scott invited me on the warrant committee that I ever got plugged back in. So, but I'm glad you did it. Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Megan Sullivan, 36 Wichita. It just occurred to me while you're talking about that, and I don't want to make more of your agenda for your town meeting 101, but it almost sounded like, a 5-minute, 10-minute discussion of the committees in town.
Yeah.
And where people are, the entry points that are good for people might make
Mm-hmm.
that a good meeting.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of, I know that the Hinckley Helpers have a fundraiser October 2nd. Right? What a great opportunity to reach out to some of the younger parents in town and be like, hey, you guys, you know, my running joke is that I walk up to people and I'm like, you know, let me introduce myself. This is who I am. And I will tell you to the letter, I hear once a week, you know, I've lived in town for 20 years. I've never talked to a selectman. I'm like, well, you know, that's unfortunate because we are here representing the citizens. So I enjoy that. And October 2nd, I will try to recruit more people because I know we've got all these open committees, and the sooner we get them linked in, the more they're going to find it's a great group of people to work with.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Bob Sloney at 6 Overfield. You know, clearly, I think the communication process that we've talked about and that Scott has initiated is really important. And obviously, you know, having spent the time on the warrant committee and then having the town meeting not get to a quorum, you know, there's a lot of things that you need to surface. I think that the town meeting 101 is a great concept in terms of education. You know, we might be able to supplement that. I go by, you see all the new signs up, sold, and, you know, and I think that it might be something that we could put together as a town that just introduces people. This is, you know, that you just give a flyer when they come in to a new in town. I mean, this is how our town government works, and this is your role. You know, a little, very quick informational piece. Gusper, you were talking about the back end of the information flow leading up to the town meeting. One of the things that I was thinking about and had talked to a couple of folks about is perhaps there might be a way to do something at the front end in terms of, you know, you talked about getting the warrant committee and the board of selectmen and, you know, to talk about when you get down to the warrant prior to the town meeting, but perhaps at the front end to have an opportunity with the moderator and some of the leadership of the town to talk about what the priorities are going into the new year.
So you're saying front end of the budget development process?
Well, of the year, yes. You know, I mean, it culminates with the budget, but it also regards to you know, property. It may be saying here are the big items that are coming into 2024 discussion, and you know, and laying those out, saying, okay, going into the year, we know what a 5-year plan is. We know what the capital budget's going to be. You know, to your point of, we have limited resources. You know, and these are the priorities. Let people be aware of that, and maybe that will trigger initiatives by individuals going, oh, wait a minute, this is, my priority is here. You know, it might be in a format of a you know, you guys have better ideas than me, but I mean, maybe something in a format of a YouTube that's run by the, you know, Medfield TV, where you could have Scott be a moderator and have some of the, you know, I don't think people, for example, may understand the difference between the school committee and the town. The fact that they're two different budgets, that they you know, how it comes together. So if you had the priorities, you'd say, well, what about this? You know, you could have the school committee chairperson and the board of selectmen, and maybe have Scott get questions come from the committee, from the general population, and just use it as an informational to say, hey, because otherwise what happens now, I think, is that when the first Monday in May shows up, the first time that people are thinking about these things, you know, it's like, well, where did this come from? So just an idea that maybe front end, we could set some, a sense as to what as you said, some of the items are gonna come in that we don't know about, but a lot of them are gonna be developing over the course of the year. And it's just something to do front end, it might get people involved. I'm just very big on, let's communicate, because we don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, I'm trying, Bob, not pushing back on the idea, but I'm trying to visualize what it is that, in practical terms, that we have we essentially have two operating budgets, the school budget and the town budget. And I'm trying to think of when, like on the town side, I think over the years, we've had a pretty tight rein on budget growth, so that there's never any remarkably unusual changes in the town budget. On the school side, my perception is that the school committee takes a while working with the superintendent in the budget process to arrive at that kind of high-level guidance about what is it we think we need to have. So I'm trying to figure out where the front end actually falls relative to the start of that budget process.
Well, I have more of a perception that it's not the nuts and bolts of the budget as much as it's the overview of the town priorities and what are the important issues that we're gonna touch upon coming up to 2024's town meeting. You know, the numbers themselves, that can be addressed in April, the process, you know. But the idea, you know, even to the extent of, you know, the water treatment plan, is that a big issue in the coming year?
Okay.
You know, what's the priority on the school building this year? Just to give that overview so people understand what that is. You know, so it's really a broader concept, but what I think might be a benefit of it is that it would demonstrate to people, you know, what the role of each one of these parts is. And as you mentioned before, who do I go to? Okay, I heard this in this conversation of this public forum. I'm gonna go to the school committee and talk about this, or I'm gonna go to the Board of Selectmen and talk about this. And just give people an idea of where we're going down the road, because it's not a surprise.
Right.
I mean, we could sit here in this room amongst us who are active and say, these are the priorities, we know what they're gonna be. Let's share that with the general population so they can say, okay, I can see where that fits into the context of the town.
So let me push again. So we have two capital budgets. There's the capital equipment and there's the capital maintenance. Those are, it might still be worthwhile to have people get briefed on what's coming down the road, but at least those two frameworks are established, and if you wanted to figure out on your own, you could go to the website and you could look and you'd know. Are you talking about major capital projects? I'm trying to think of what other information are we talking about here? A few years ago, 10 years ago, one way or the other, probably by osmosis, it was, if you put a little effort into it, you could figure out what the town's building construction sequence was. Some parts of it, when I got here 25 years ago, Parks and Rec was number 5. In the years since 25 years ago, Parks and Rec, it's never obviously, to me, ever been higher than number 5, even if there weren't 4 other projects above it. So I kind of knew how things worked. We kind of knew that the public, you know, the DPW garage was going to happen, then the public safety building, and then a school. And Parks and Rec has always been below those fast cycle things. But is that the piece that is at least the most important of what you're talking about, Bob? Is that people don't, you know, people wouldn't, and if you don't put some thought into it, you don't know what that strategy is for priorities.
Yeah, to be candid, I don't have a specific
Okay, yeah,
rollout of it, but I
Yep.
do think you're touching on one.
okay.
So let's say you have that opening and you say, here we are going into 2024, and Parks and Recs is number 8, or it didn't even come up in the conversation. You know, it would be a question that comes in to the moderator, and he says, what about Parks and Recs? You know, and then you could have that conversation, you know, Christine with the with the department requirements, you know, and then perhaps the select person would come in and say, well, you know, yes, that's here, but just to your point, just to have that dialogue that says, well, you know, Parks and Recs has been number 5, and it's still number 5.
Right.
And then people can see up front,
Yep.
as opposed, because, you know, as a member of the Warrant Committee, and I speak for myself, but as a member of the Warrant Committee, our job is just to put pieces together and to present it, you know. We don't have any, you know, my vote on the Warrant Committee is just for us to make a presentation as to whether it be thumbs up or thumbs down on a particular article. After that, I'm just one of the 8,000 voters, you know. So we don't have any specific, but the point is that during the course of the year, we go through everything. as you well know. You know, we go through every item, we go through every budget, and, you know, all our meetings are open to the public, but, you know, as you said, everybody has important things to do, but if we had something up front that they knew what the priorities were, well, I'm gonna make a note to sit in on the Park and Rec budget, or I'm gonna make it a point that when the warrant committee said that they're gonna meet with the water department, or, hey, on the highway department, where are we gonna be with our roads? Those are the kinds of things we can talk about in broader terms that will give people a heads up, those who are, you know, who will be interested. But I think a lot of people might be able to, having that open forum, they would be able to access through YouTube or something and go, okay, just, you know, spend a little time with it. It's just an idea, but it's just something that I think, to your point, the more education we can do on what the town meeting issues and articles are, but my thought might be, is that perhaps there's a benefit to doing it up front and letting them know, letting the town know, this is the direction we're going in. And you can get it from yourselves, from Christine, from the school committee, just in a broader sense, and then it will develop over the course of the year, but people can then participate in and give input.
Yeah, because they are,
It's a broad process. Your details is in
So
the,
given
where the
that
devil
the
lives.
select board meetings are an established mechanism for getting information out to the residents, maybe the select board meeting should create a piece of each meeting where there's an educational component for the town residents, so that create a structure that covers all of the different things in the town that you're talking about during the year. I mean, we have a couple dozen, 36 meetings a year. We could cover a lot of topics if we devoted half an hour to each meeting to it.
Well, I think it follows the same concept of, you know, when you publish what the warrant committee's agenda is, similarly, your agendas are all published. And, but it gives people the heads up at front end going, gee, when this topic comes up, I'm gonna attend the warrant, the select board's meeting, or I'm gonna listen in on that. Yeah, I think it's all communication, and how do you access it?
When it's also, and I love what you're saying, because it's a crawl, walk, run. First time you do it, maybe we won't get as much input as we want. Second year, because somebody learned and said to a neighbor, oh, you know what, I learned that last year at such and such a meeting. Year 3, year 4, year 5, and 10 years from now, it could be the process, right? That people now realize, if you live in Medfield, you can start to learn in the January, February timeframe, and then move forward. But I think it's really important. I said this to Scott when I was running for selectman, that what I find frustrating at town meeting is a lot of people show up that night, and because they got the yellow book the week before, and it was referred to me, well, Eileen, you can go to the warrant meeting, they have the review. I'm like, yeah, but that's not really the platform. Like, it's not your job at that point to then go through each one and educate the citizens, and to do it a week or two before the annual town meeting, that's brutal. So how do we start thinking about communicating better to our residents? And we're not gonna solve it in 1 year, but if we start somewhere, we put a stake in the ground and we start moving forward, there's ways to do it.
Yeah, I think the, you know, one of the takeaway that I have is that people didn't come to the town meeting because they're not interested.
Right.
I think people didn't come for a number of reasons. Maybe it wasn't convenient, or the timing. I mean, you can go into 1,000 different reasons. But I think the bottom line continues to be, I don't know what I'm supposed to know,
Right.
you know. And I think that the course, the 101 concept, this is how it works, you know, even to go out to the point of saying, this is what the select board does, and this is what it doesn't do. You know? This is what the warrant committee does, and this is what it doesn't do, you know. And at the end, you're, Mr. and Mrs. Citizen, are the decider. And it might put that in a context, and then you come back and they go, well, how can I decide what I don't know? Then we gotta start feeding them. You have to work with them and give them the information and give them, you know, and just, like you said, it's a journey, but let's start with the benefit of the doubt. They wanna know, and we need to give it to them. as opposed to, hey, it's here. You know, you can't go, we've had that before, well, all our meetings are open. That's not the right answer, It's how do we, give them, get them to come, or get it to them, and I think that,
So the issue that comes to mind for me in thinking about what you're saying, Bob, is that at first I was picturing a cyclical process, that there's a certain point in the budget cycle where this is the point where we give you the preview of the town meeting in 4 months. And then as you were talking, my head went in a different direction that said, well, actually, in any given year, the things that people want to know about are a function of what's going on. And so it might be more of a challenge of figuring out how you solicit inputs from people about what they'd like to know. So there is no standard, it's not like we do this, the 101 thing is great. You come into town, we teach you how that's great. That's the ground, that's the foundational stuff. But for what you're talking about, 1 year, like this year, people might say, well, I need to understand where we are with 40B. I don't get about this MBTA community stuff. I don't get what we're doing at the hospital. I thought we were pretty good shape on 40B. What's going on? What's with this group home stuff with the Affordable Housing Trust? Having a whole picture about what the town is doing with all these multiple inputs all around housing and why we're doing what we're doing. Because even I can look at that sometimes and go, this is nuts. I'm not sure whether we're being swept away by the tide or whether we're in control of our own course here. So it takes some thought. So that might be the issue this year, but who knows? Next year, it could be recreational opportunities in town, or how come there's no Parks and Rec facility? So figuring out a way to get a sense of what people actually are most interested in better understanding in any given year might be.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a little bit of be careful what you wish for, I'm saying to myself, because, you open it up, right? Which is really what you want to do, in spite of the consequences, because if you put out, this is what our priorities are, or this is what I'm thinking about as a select board or as a school committee or other departments, from the administration, well, we're not gonna put money into this, but we're gonna put money onto this road, and this is where the money is, and this is how it works. Most of the time, you're gonna not hear from the people who go, well, that's a good idea. You always know, you're gonna hear from the person who says, well, what about my street? But that's what we need to hear. So.
Jerry?
Were you just holding before, or did you have something to say?
I just wanted to,
Okay,
Lipa Sass, 24 Marlin. I wanted to go back to the Medfield 101, Town Meeting 101, which I think is an awesome idea, very, very useful, especially now that we know the population is turning over. And I think not everybody who's moving to town is aware that most of town government is voluntary, like volunteer people stepping up. And I think this is an important concept to just put out, that we have very limited paid staff, and this town is run by people who step up. And I think that people are really not aware of that. And the second observation I had, especially with young people being busy with kids, with work, with, all sorts of things, is that we have all this information that we want to put out with the 101, with the committees, with town meeting. It's very easy to overwhelm people. Not everybody has time to attend meetings or even read through a lengthy document. Is to maybe split it up in bits and pieces so people can go through it quickly, and if they want to, they can take a deeper dive, but it's really important that we keep it digestible and not, there is a lot of information, and we have to guard against that information overload.
I think it's more complicated than that, Hilly, because this is not merely figuring out how to give people a detailed understanding of all the issues in town. There are some people who are interested in actually doing that. They may have a hard time finding the time to do it on all the issues they want to do it. That's a minority. It's an important minority, because oftentimes they're the ones that dig in. He's not here, but I'll call him out. The Bill Massaros of the town play an invaluable role. And Chris, I'll call you out too on this.
And Jerry.
No. Trying to be balanced. I don't want big swelled heads in the back room. There are certain people who will dig in on certain issues. I mean, I could go to Christian Donner on the rail trail. It's different things that people care about. They dig down deep. The majority of people are interested in sort of understanding stuff, but recognize either they don't have the disposition to actually dig in like you'd have to if you're on the warrant committee, and they're trying to get an understanding that's deep enough that when someone they trust tells them this is the right thing to do, they're okay with it. So, you know, it was, Bob, you were talking about the warrant committee, what the warrant committee does. This is editorial on my part, but when I was on the warrant committee, the way I viewed the warrant committee, it is the lone designated voice of the taxpayer throughout the budget process. Sometimes the selectmen might worry about it, maybe the school committee might worry about it, but if there's any advocate for the taxpayer who's a steady advocate for the taxpayer in our process, it's the warrant committee. So if the warrant committee, when I was on it, the way I would look at it is if I went to the public and recommended that they put money into something like we accelerated the DPW garage and the public safety building, where that was far faster than we would normally do that. But the interest rates were so doggone low that we basically said, this is when it makes sense to lean forward in the saddle. And fortunately, they listened. So the education thing is you got to be smart and sophisticated enough to explain to that small group of people who want to dig into the details. And you got to figure out how to provide appropriate information for the larger group of people who are still a minority, who are willing to devote their time to showing up. And then there's a whole bunch of other people that presumably are relying on one or, you know, people from one or both of those groups to say, so what do you think? I don't vote for that one. Okay, I won't vote for it. Because I trust your judgment. I don't have time to figure it out. That's, I think, it's a little bit like sailboat racing when you're going upwind. You know, you have to tack. You're not going to just go straight where you're trying to go. You have to angle your way to where that's kind of what it takes, I think, to get this stuff done.
So also with, 101, would you be able to reach out through the schools? Because I think those are, the new people coming in would be young parents, and I think that would be awesome if you could use their resources and either through their website or publications, but also if you had actually opportunity to meet the parents in person, like at some parent evening or something, just spend 10 minutes saying, Town of Medfield, this is what we do,
I'd go a step further. I would make sure the students all know that all of them are invited to come.
Especially the 18-year-olds that can vote.
It might start earlier in that. If you want to instill civic spirit in people, you don't do it, it's the town you grew up in and what you saw.
Well, I definitely would love to see the schools. I wonder if half the kids even understand how this town is run, right? I mean, everyone hears the name, like, it's a mayor. Like, we don't have a mayor. And I hear kids say, well, we should have a mayor. I'm like, no, it's not the town you live in. That's not how it works, right? So 101 even starts.
Just for the record, the chair does have a mayor. She's 27 years old. I put her out every morning in the pasture right next to it. So.
Yeah, but you leave her out in the ring, too.
I leave her. I do. You got to toughen her up.
Jerry Potts, 7 Curve Street. So one of the things that's been interesting to look at, so media, local newspapers used to cover so much of this, and of course with the implosion of media, there are no local outlets anymore that really do in-depth coverage of anything. They just don't have the staff. It's not a knock on it. It's just the way that the publishing world has gone. And this isn't a plug for the Insider, but no. And it really, what was interesting, and we have these conversations, is it has like an 80% open rate with more than 1,000 people, and all of the articles that are sort of, there's a long list of stuff. They're all trackable on what people are interested in. So, we talk about but we'll go through and sort of look at like, whoa, who would have thought this topic would be this? And, whether that's the town doing something on a more broad basis that has just quick lists of things that if you're interested, you drill in and dig into more detail, but you get a high level of what are on people's mind by the open rate and also by what they're clicking on. And you don't have to guess, and it doesn't have to, it's like, whoa, this topic just went, And because it's presented in just a news informational format, you do get a pretty good sense, a pulse of what people are thinking. And so a little bit to what Bob was talking about, if you know those things, you can bubble them up, then you can provide those committees that are dealing with it that information, number one. And then number two, you can hear from those committees on like, okay, well, here's how you can get involved in this. There seems to be a lot of interest in these 5 topics, PFAS or whatever. And let those committees know that that's kind of what's bubbling up. If there's a way, I think to all of us, I still say this at age 60 and being in town for 30 years, there's some committees that I'm still intimidated on. Like I don't fully know what they do, and I should, and then I go to Chris and go, what do they do? So if I'm that and I've been here 30 years, I guarantee you there's someone here who's been 5 years and is marginally keeping their head above water just raising kids that's going out of their way to learn about, stormwater treatment, right? But if you connect it to them in a meaningful way and you give them an easy, digestible way to get an entry point into it, I think people want to be involved. And I would also say, to the point on civics, it's gone. Like, we don't teach this anymore in the schools. We lost Richard DeSorga. Like, this idea of teaching basic government, I mean, it's not just in Medfield. You can see it across the country right now. And we need it. So, if there's one thing that we all can do as sort of this generation that hopefully can pass on something to the next generation, is it all runs because of you guys coming up. And if you don't know the entry point on how to do it, then we have a responsibility to help bridge that gap and work with the schools or work with, bring Richard back, clone Richard, maybe. So, yeah, that's
All right. I'm not quite sure how that's all gonna work, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to shoot for. Yes.
One quick point, Christine, and I don't want to put you on the spot. It'd be great to know, maybe at a future meeting if you don't know. But one of the articles, when I posted the information on Civic Plus and people to sign up to get, I had a lot of people click on that and I don't know where we are with what percentage of the town is subscribed to that, but it would be nice to do a little.
It's very little.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do a little campaign on.
It's why if we included it in the beginning of the warrant report, we ask people while they're sitting there to do the QR code to sign up for it, and we have very few people who sign up for it.
Can you post it in the Insider? Can you?
Yeah, I'm
All
gonna
right.
sign you up right now.
And then some trails that I can use the QR code.
Okay, so we good? Conversation on goals for Christine's good until we finalize them
Yep, I'll
next
add it.
meeting.
Well, I would add another goal to the ones that are here,
We're not good.
and it would just be a general one to facilitate the goals that the select board has.
Boy, that'll keep you busy.
I believe that's my role in the charter. I think that's already spelled out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that it would be good to state it clearly that that's part of what we hope for,
Who's we?
the select board.
All right. So let's move on to the town goals. I'm not sure what you all did in preparation for the goals. I have copies of what I did in preparation for the goals for all of you.
Good.
And Christine has an electronic version, so that we're all using the same format, it looks like, which is a good thing. Christine, I'll actually throw both, I'll give
Yeah,
you,
I
there's
can have.
two copies of that. I've got my copy
Thank you.
here. And just so you know what I did, anything that so I went down the right-hand column.
Okay.
I had taken a look at the broad goals. I didn't have any particular reason I wanted to change those.
Okay, I'm with
I
you.
took a look at the key focus areas and the long-term goals, and I didn't immediately see a reason to change those. So I only looked at what was originally 2018 to 2019 goals.
Okay.
The color coding I used on those is that if it's green, I'm suggesting that it's complete, so it actually could be dropped off, and it's all tentative, so if you don't agree it's complete, then it stays on. If it was red, it was something new, a new goal that it occurred to me we might want to look at, or it was some comment about the green that was a concern, and then there's a couple that are sort of a yellow-orange. those were mainly ones that I kind of like had a question, you know, like, are we done with this yet?
Okay.
Or I had wording on something that I was like not sure that it was exactly right, but I just threw it out there as sort of tentative ideas.
Share your copy with the audience?
I can make a copy.
If you have the electronic version, so you're
And you
saying
can
bringing
share the
it up.
document?
We're testing capabilities here, but,
So that would be-
hold on,
that
because
would
if you
be
can't,
Share screen if you brought up the file?
No, that I can do.
because I also could
Yeah,
share.
it's 'cause okay,
Is it a question of getting it to the TV? Or,
yeah, let's see. You might be able to do it easier from yours than mine.
the first thing, of course, I didn't bring my charge cord. I'm down to 31%. I should be able to get through that. I
If you email it
can,
to me, I can always open it, because I've got plenty. I've got like 98% charge.
okay.
I'm
So
sending it to you right now.
Okay, so Christine's gonna send it to you. I have it. Not that one, though. Wrong one. It's a Word document.
Okay, I got that.
There you go.
I mean, not yet, but I have my Word open. Actually, I have the original open. Oh, this came in perfect.
And the other point here is not, when I did that, I wasn't intending to have my update be the anchor for this whole conversation, so we should,
Well, I'm going to be honest. I looked these over, and when I saw that we were still 2018, 2019, I came in tonight saying, okay, you
Good.
put these, where are we going? So I didn't have anything
Okay.
other than having a
Okay.
discussion so we can move
okay,
forward. So I
that's fine.
appreciate this.
Okay.
All right,
And
so let me
Pete, you've
share
got some
this.
stuff, though, is it?
I have some thoughts about it. I wasn't sure how we were gonna proceed
Okay.
tonight, so.
Well, then maybe it's
if
a
you
good
wanna
thing
go
I
through
did do
these
what I
one by
did.
one,
Okay.
I'm happy to do
Host-
that, or
Host
do it
disabled
another night, or
participation.
whatever.
No, you should be able to share.
I cannot.
Hold on.
You're the host, right?
There you go.
Sure.
Try this one more time. There we go.
You got them? Because I can share it on my screen for now. It's just if I run out of
No, I got it right now.
juice. You got it, okay.
All
There we
right.
go. Yep.
Perfect. All right.
So if you want me to, I can start walking us through this, and you can shut me up whenever you want to start talking? Is that,
Sure.
so?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So you all can see what this is. So just by way of review for anybody who's listening in, when we first developed these goals, there were five major goals that are the ones identified in italics. There's one page for each goal. The goals are available on the town website. I think you go to the Board of Selectmen segment, and there's the goals that are over there. So these are all pretty much the same. What I did was I went through, and they were originally in here as 2018 to 19 goals. What I did was I went through them all, so I sort of did an audit of all of them. And if I thought the goal had been completed, I made it green, and you'll see it's marked as complete. So for instance, in this first one, where the overarching goal has to do with managing town finances, I'm not going to read it all, but basically charting a course for the town that's fiscally prudent. The key focus areas you can see on the left in terms of the things that we're trying to do, being fiscally responsible, reducing reliance on the residential tax base, and promoting a business-friendly atmosphere was sort of the major three focus areas. We talked about implementing an agreed-to structured budgeting policy to improve residents' understanding of town budgets. So this was actually a little bit along the lines of what you're driving for, Bob. Given the financial policy documents that we've put out and the information, the structure that you and Nick developed over this past year around a clearer view of how we were complying with that, so residents could look at our budgets and look at the analysis of those budgets and understand them. I said, I think that's complete, but I had a question that said, well, I think it's complete, but if, does anybody have anything else that you think needs to be done beyond there? You can stop me, I'll just keep talking, and if you want to stop me, just stop me. The second thing I did is I added one in light of the most recent events here in town that probably one of our goals around this. I put it under the financial side because the assistant town administrator, the way we're configured right now, I think Nick has picked up the financial management, the heavier end of the financial management side of town administration, where it's been different. Mike, I think, used to be the financial guy, and you were sort of the manager of the town's operations. You're the manager of the town's operations, and I'm not saying that to imply you don't understand the finance, but the assistant town administrator, from my perspective, did more of the legwork around the financial management side of things that had to be done. So it's a little different than how we used to operate, but I'm assuming that this assistant town administrator will continue on in that. We'll have to develop into that role.
Does the new budget structuring apply also to the school budget?
So what we're talking about in terms of budget structure is that we have a new budget document, and each department has a section within that document. I don't have a final draft for you. I'm still waiting out. It's about 10 days before we get the final. The section for the school department is their budget presentation and their budget document that they submit to the warrant committee. That was included as their section for this year.
So the financial policy, well, so the townwide financial policies apply to the combined budget, so that's
Right.
important. Beyond that, any of the other, I'm thinking of specific policy decisions like OPEB funding, if they came out of the Board of Selectmen, they have to do with the town side, not the school side. I thought one of the other next things we talked about, work with the town planner to identify parcels of land that could be rezoned as commercial. I said, I don't think we've done any rezoning from residential to commercial. We talked about identifying one parcel of town-owned land suitable for a commercial development and create a plan, and I put that down as complete with a question mark, because I think the most significant thing that we've done is the state hospital. And that was, there was enough rezoning and everything on that. It's not commercial, but it's a rental complex, so I think it fits the spirit of wanting it to be diversified. So rather than sitting there saying, let's go find another acre somewhere we can rezone, I kind of said, I think that's, the significance of what we're doing up at the state hospital is enough that I don't think we need that goal to be in there anymore.
Okay.
At least for the time being. I left in, identify at least one parcel of land not town-owned, even if zoned residential, that could be commercially developed. Work with the town planner, planning board to evaluate potential to be rezoned. I don't think we've done that, so I just carried it as a not complete.
Okay.
That's why it's red. Rezone, the next one, rezone the business district and the downtown to provide more business retail spaces, find ways to extend the downtown business district to enhance areas like Park Street as integral components of the downtown business district. I carried that as in process because we are looking at trying to do some things with rezoning to get the units above commercial, and it's actually not just the downtown because we're going all the way out to the Shaw's Plaza with it, but it seemed to me we were doing that. I think Sarah's been looking at Park Street and things we could do, or trying to find ways to make the downtown. So I kind of thought that was covered, but we're not done, so it's not green yet. Number 4, support a process for redesigning the gun range in support of the Trinity project. That was a new one.
Yep.
Clearly a very important thing for us to do as part of the Trinity project. We have to figure out how to address the gun range issue. The early information we have would suggest cautious grounds for optimism that we're going to find a good solution to that, working with the state, because the state actually has an interest in upgrading the training facilities for police. So I think we'll get somewhere. It'll take a while, but I think we'll get somewhere good with that. Number 5, pursue reuse of the town landfill for solar energy generation. That was a total thing I created out of my own head, without knowing for sure that this coming year is exactly the right time to be worried about that. But after I kind of did the audit of what we had done, I said, well, maybe you should try to be creative and think of some of the possible goals. So that one is in there strictly as a possible goal. And I did have a question actually about whether that's an FY23.
It's certainly something that we should be working towards as fast as possible. It's
Right.
been a slow process, unfortunately, so.
Because I was told that is the intended use for it. Like, we
It's
can't
been-
build on it, we can't take it. Yeah, okay.
That's been the intention for probably at least 8 years.
And are we waiting because we have to cross a date line that says now we can do things on that land?
No,
No.
that's not,
We're
that's
past
not
that
true.
window?
No, that's not, that window's never existed.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, I thought just by what we have buried there, you had to not touch the dirt in any way, shape, or form for a period of time.
Just
Really?
have to get a
No.
state certificate.
Where it's not fully closed out, we need to have a closure acceptance by DEP. So we're working with them. We started pre-pandemic, and unfortunately, other things took precedence. So we are actually, Drew Hoyt, who we brought on as our environmental counsel for the state hospital, he and I have been having meetings. He is a former employee at DEP, has a lot of contacts there. He is working to try and get us moving to the next step.
And do we know what the next step is?
No.
Okay.
And we probably don't have a reliable, I think you're right, Pete. We probably put it here, but it may, I don't think we should start crying if we don't have it done in FY '23.
No, but I think it's something, and maybe it makes more sense to be on my goals, and maybe actually we're doing these backwards. And we should have done your goals first and then my goals.
We didn't approve yours yet.
Good point. I might redo a few things.
I conclude it's a good thing we did it.
I think it's important that we work with DEP to try to get this done
Oh,
as soon
yeah.
as possible.
Oh, definitely.
It's just an asset that's sitting there not producing anything.
Yeah, and it could be
can't use it.
productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second, appoint a townwide master planning committee to revamp the current town master plan. That's done. So I would drop that one because it's done. The next one down, this was one that I put in orange yellow because it was in there, but work with the downtown business community and residents to identify a committee to assume the responsibilities previously held by the Downtown Study Committee and the Economic Development Committee with the goal of promoting economic development in the extended downtown area that balances business needs and the needs of downtown residents, probably under the leadership of the town planner. And my question was, is that actually how we want to address this with a committee, or this one's already in your goal? This is the one that I talked about adding to your goals at the end, so it's not like you're totally escaped the town.
And here I would think that we would talk to Sarah Raposa about how she thinks that we
Yeah.
can best do this and then move forward somehow. But it's something that we haven't been pushing on, and I think that it would be good to get it back on the list of things that we push to have done.
So I was basically calling the shot here on this one. It's like, is it in or is it out? And I think you're right. We talk to Sarah and see how she would like to do it, if that makes sense to you, Christine. That's,
No problem.
and then the last one, incorporate the state hospital master plan into the townwide master plan before affecting any MSH land sales in order to secure the LDA bonus money. That's complete. So that one presumably would drop off. So if you go to the next page.
So just a silly question, 2022 to 2023, so is that calendar year, or?
We're in 2020, so it's FY '23.
It's our fiscal year.
Okay,
So 2022 is the second half of 2022, first half of '23 is FY '23.
okay, that's just trying to sort out
Yep,
how you do it,
yep.
okay.
July
So
to
one of
June.
the things that I would
Okay.
suggest that we think about adding to the list, because this is sort of the financial area of goals, is to have the town look at the issue of accessory dwelling units. Because if you want to create a lot of extra tax revenue for the town, that's the fastest way for us to do that, off of the residential property. Well, it would be residential property tax, but it would be residential property tax without municipal costs.
So
Because they would be small, 1,000-square-foot units that wouldn't have a lot of municipal costs attached.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Sarah reported to you recently that the planning board was beginning to look into that.
They are,
and
yeah.
Doing that,
Yeah.
so.
So the only question, I think that's fine. The only thing is it might go under goal 3, which is the goal where we start talking about housing
Right.
goals. So I know it has a positive beneficial impact, but it also
Yeah, it could fit
has a
in
housing-
different places, sure.
housing impact.
Yeah.
So it may go,
Yeah.
let's put it in, but it may be it may be in the housing goal, that's all.
Sure,
So, okay.
sure. Because it works with the seniors,
Yeah.
too.
Right,
Right,
And
and
it
supporting
it
them,
works with
so-
people. There was a I happen to forget why I was listening. Oh, I was listening in for the dog boarding on Adams Street.
Oh, okay.
But there was a couple that had come because they wanted to put in an in-law apartment. So it's not just seniors, it's also, having your parents be able to live somewhere. Could be au pair apartments, I guess, even, but,
Yeah, the
yeah.
family apartment bylaw is fairly restrictive,
yeah.
Yes.
and this could open it up. It
Yep.
would actually create a lot of wealth in the town, too,
Mhm.
because we'd be basically creating building units for property owners, and they would,
Without necessarily undermining zoning, though, because you
Yeah.
can also destroy wealth depending on how you do it.
it,
but-
So, I mean, the decision is whether or not you want to increase your density in your town or not, and whether that's appealing.
Yeah.
And so that-
I'm guessing most homeowners will not want to do that because of the cost impact it'll have on them. But that's a separate thing from a dwelling unit that's added to a house that people, it's kind of an integral part of a particular house. That's a different story.
Well, and depending on what part of town, because again,
Yeah,
they already,
yeah, that too,
they're already
that
small,
too.
small
That too.
postage-sized
Yep,
lots, so you don't want to
yep.
crowd what we already concerned about
Right.
back in 2017.
So anyway, goal 2 is the second financial one. And the thing behind the second goal was the idea that oftentimes the town will make a decision whether it's hiring people, whether it was accepting the free turf field at the high school, not recognizing the long-term financial implications of that decision. So when you hire someone, if we're not taking into account the long-term retirement cost because we're only looking at the operating budget, there's decisions that can be made without taking the full economic impacts into account. So that's goal 2, is trying to get at that. And trying to get out, basically was trying to get a handle on all the long-term financial things. So the first one of those, if you can scroll forward
Oh,
to that
sorry.
second. Yeah.
Sorry about that. It's so deep intent in my notes.
The first one of those was, being proactive about planning for the maintenance upgrade of town buildings. We have completed and approved the 20-year capital maintenance plan, so I put that down in green as complete. But then I had down develop a plan to fund building improvements deemed necessary and appropriate for funding from the 20-year capital plan. That, to me, sounded like that was complete, but because it was there as a separate goal, I put it in yellow-orange to see if I was missing something. And then I think I added the update, revised the capital maintenance. So we didn't need to develop it, we didn't need to allocate everything, but we do need to continue to update and revise the plan. So I put that in as the action now that should be there as far as I can tell.
The 20-year capital maintenance plan didn't include all the buildings. There were 4 buildings that never got included in that, so. it was
Right, because
never
they were brand new at the time, so there was actually money that was put in the municipal building stabilization fund this year to do the update of the master plan, of the building master plan.
And that's one of those issues that we really should look at some point, Chris. When we got the disability study report on the town, those new buildings had numerous
Yeah.
things that were not done properly from a disability standpoint.
And, well, some of the regulations have changed since those buildings were constructed, so now they're in violation.
All right,
What
if
are those
that's,
buildings?
if that's the reason.
What are the buildings you're referring to?
Public safety and DPW garage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I put one of those in yellow and orange, because it looks like we probably have to look. One part of it is to make sure we've added the 4 buildings. The second part is to make sure we probably, in that context of this plan, need to figure out disability requirements.
My eyes would ask, by the way, that you don't use orange next time.
Yeah, I was trying to be more amorphous about those than the red and the green, and I'll find something different. I probably could have used a darker orange, and it would have been fine.
Darker orange would have been helpful.
Right. Next one, it was the funding, ongoing maintenance and upkeep of towns, transportation, water, and sewer infrastructure. Meet with the Water and Sewer Board, town administration, determine solutions for issues identified by Water and Sewer Board, developing plan going forward. I said that was in process, because I don't know that I wasn't exactly sure what that was focused on. I think we've been doing a lot of it, but I'm not sure we've done all of it. So I
Correct.
put that as in process. Develop sidewalk development plan for the town, lays out specific plans, priorities, and sequencing to increase the extent and quality of the sidewalks in town. I put that as in process, because I know we've been working on it for some time, but there's still clamoring demand for that.
Mo should have a presentation to you this fall.
Okay, and then I added one new thing with a question. Tap ARPA funding to accelerate the progress on sidewalk construction. That was as a question mark, because you and we had some informal discussion about the fact we got this money that's coming from ARPA that the county is using their own filter on what's acceptable or not, but apparently one of the things might be sidewalk construction, so we might be able to do more there. And then my general question was, within the context of town infrastructure, water, sewer, and probably highways more than any, or roads, are there any other things that need to be done in this area that I hadn't thought of? I couldn't think of them, but you can think about that. Next one down, recognizing and plan for the full costs associated with expansions of town staff programs and services. So this is a philosophical thing that says when we're gonna start hiring new people, let's make sure that we actually fully recognize the cost of hiring new people. And I don't think we're there yet, because every time we talk about hiring new people, the question comes up again, so what is the impact on OPEB? And it's like, we did get an estimate when we did the ALS study committee, I think it was $5,000 was the impact on OPEB, annual cost for that. And I haven't heard another number since then, but I know the actuary really didn't want to give us that number. So it's one of those things where it's a less precise number, but for planning purposes, that seems to have worked pretty well. The thing that was in here was to increase from 400,000 to 425,000, the OPEB contribution. We've blown past that. I said it was complete or it's overcome by events. For the FY23, we put $500,000 into OPEB. So I just said, let's call that complete. We have a financial policy that's stressed with it. We don't need to put an action there. Next, develop a plan to reduce employee usage of town health benefits. This was relevant back in 2018-19, but I think we got people off the more expensive, we at least made progress in getting people off the more expensive
We
health
did,
options.
we worked, in 2019, we worked with the Insurance Advisory Committee to do some plan design changes, for some cost savings, both for the employee and the town.
Right. So my only question there in red was, is there anything further here, or can we declare this complete?
I think you can declare it complete, but it's something that is an ongoing review for us as we put the budget
Right.
together every year,
Okay.
looking at what the best options are.
But in the spirit of that, like when I first read this, I'm like, okay, what do we mean reduce employee usage? We certainly want to keep our people covered and healthy, right? So you're just saying, so you're working with our insurance company to see what they can be doing to
For
saving?
plan design. yeah.
Okay, all
And I
right.
think the other thing we did
But we'd
years
like-
ago had to do with getting people on Medicare. Once people were old enough to be
Yeah.
eligible for Medicare, they had to go on Medicare.
They have to go on Medicare.
So
Okay.
You do actually reduce usage of the
Yes.
town's
Okay,
health plans when you do those kinds of things.
okay.
And then establish procedures to ensure full long-term financial obligations of the town are taken into account when hiring staff, increase public visibility into the full financial implications associated with staff hiring decisions. And I just carry that as in process. We do it, I'm not convinced we do it with 100% thoroughness and accuracy, but we're going in the right direction there.
Okay.
Next slide is goal number
Oops.
3. So now we're getting into the community housing goals. Goal area number 3, basically what this addresses is the various recognized housing shortfalls that we felt that we had back in, when we first did this. So we were just getting started with the 40B requirements. And we were trying to make sure we could get out in 40B in a way that we were in charge of how things developed, which meant you had to park yourself in safe harbor in order to prevent hostile 40Bs. What I've got here on the gray shading, interestingly enough, in Word, I couldn't do a strike through in a table. So the dark gray shading is all effectively taken out. That was the original wording.
Okay.
And then I reworded it to be shorter, which is for 40B, complete construction of all SHI eligible housing required to achieve the 40B goal. Prior to that, it was all around achieving
And that's
safe harbor.
about 16 SHI units, isn't that at this point?
It was less than 21, it was less than the number that we had, so I think 16 might be right. But I
Yeah,
can't remember,
I think
16
with
or
our
19,
new,
yeah.
our new census figures, I think it ended up at 16.
Yep. And so that gets us through the new, if that gets us through the new census, which it should, the next time we really have a problem is in 10 more years when the next census comes, but it
And
makes
it's
more
not-
sense to stay on top.
Yeah.
And then the hospital, we'll blow through everything with the rentals, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
The next one down, providing housing for Medfield adults who are, this is the group home issue. Interesting enough, we had it identified when we did this in FY19, when we did it, we had it identified as a long-term focus area to deal with group homes. And so my question, I added it as I know the Affordable Housing Trust is looking at group homes.
Yeah.
I added it as a goal here with a question mark. Do we need a goal for group home development here? And I think it's reasonable to put it in, but.
I think we should. I think after learning more, being the new representative to the Affordable Housing Trust, we just talked about this the other night.
Okay.
And I find it just seeing what's happening in town and the strong need, I mean, absolutely, positively, we need to figure this out and find a spot.
So,
Is that an area where we could designate some ARPA money? Is that the sort of thing that ARPA would, no? Okay. What
Wait.
sort of things do they approve of, Chris?
Water and sewer infrastructure, direct COVID, there's some economic development.
Playgrounds?
Playgrounds are falling under COVID relief. And I forget what the fourth category is. Let me
Okay.
send you,
All
there's
right,
a,
that's good enough, thank you.
I can send you the full list.
Next one down, increase availability of senior housing. And the first one was dispose of the Hinckley property, and that's complete, so that's gone. Second one, adopt a senior housing overlay district. We actually tried to do that and it got voted down, so this is the one item that actually got canceled. Yeah, the issue was, I think with the town, the senior overlay district was almost like an overlay district that overlaid the entire town.
Oh, that's a little hard.
And so people were concerned about what that actually meant as a practical matter, because it was so extensive that I don't think people were philosophically against the idea of making senior housing more available, but it just was so comprehensive that people were a little afraid of it. So I think that goes away, but it's because we chose not to do it when it came down to it.
So I see in here you have provided a minimum of 120 additional units for seniors, and I think Hinckley's what, 21, 24, somewhere in there?
24.
24.
So I said, what's the current number? Because we've had other 40B projects that have been, I believe, favored seniors. Part of the problem is you can favor a senior to get into a 40B or local. I think Hinckley South is the first project we've had that was explicitly called out as senior housing.
Turtlebrook.
Oh, yeah, Turtlebrook,
Turtlebrook,
yeah, yeah.
yep.
So should have thought of that.
And what about, so Aura, is there any advantage to senior housing?
No.
No?
No.
That's a bummer, okay.
So part of this is we set 120 units, but our ability to do that in the context of 40B, so think about this, when 40B came up, we did the senior housing study that showed we really needed far more than 120. And we had an interest in wanting to build 40B housing that was affordable for seniors, because we wanted seniors, not families.
Right.
But then what happened is the state put some restrictions on what you could do by way of carving things like that out. In the case of Hinckley South, I think because we had done so much in other areas, as I recall, the state went along with it.
Okay.
But as a policy, so many towns had done this as a way of preventing more kids from coming into their town.
Oh, wow, okay.
That the state started souring on that. So I don't know that that goal is really realistic. It might be realistic for us eventually to have 120 units of senior housing if we're counting Turtlebrook and we're counting Hinckley South. I don't know that trying to drive that to happen, given the actually excess of affordable housing that we're going to be putting in. There are a lot of seniors that I think that would like to be up at the state hospital. So if that development takes place and it's, either the affordable units or maybe even some of the other units, just because of the market rates I think we'll be addressing that indirectly, even though we don't have.
Okay.
So I actually almost think that's one where we could look at that second column about whether that 120 units should still be there.
Right, okay.
And any seniors that are listening are free to send me feedback in the coming week if you think I've really just thrown everybody under the bus. But I think we'll get there with housing that's attractive to seniors.
So it's not specifically housing, but it is aimed at housing. Wayland, Sudbury have done assistance to their seniors to pay their property taxes. They get special acts of the legislature, I think, to do it. I gathered that information and gave it to a former member of the Council on Aging, and they didn't seem to do anything with it, but I think that that's something the town should maybe want to look at.
Yeah, I don't mind looking at it. I have a philosophical issue with exempting some people from the financial consequences of the votes that they make. And so I know there's some places that do that. I'm willing to listen to how that works. I have concerns about how it can be abused. And I have concerns about carving out part of a population that suddenly doesn't really care what financial decisions you make in town. And that's not an absolute, but those are the kinds of issues.
I
Those are
think
the
that-
hurdles I think we'd have to get
Yeah,
over.
yeah, I think it's a program that makes it easier for people to stay in town
Yeah,
by
yeah.
not paying all of their full property tax. And it does transfer that burden to the rest of the population in town is
Right.
the issue.
Right.
And the residents would need to decide whether they're willing to do that. As a benefit, you're assisting long-term older people, and there is a benefit to the rest of the town, because if that property turns over, that property that has no school children will have school children in it with the next owner, and municipal costs for those. And so that the town could see it as an investment in its long-term existing older residents, but,
And
it's
the
a,
state would come back, I think there's been a study that's talked about how there's this high percentage of residents in Medfield that are what they call overhoused. I now qualify,
Right.
we have a 4-bedroom colonial, it's just me and my wife.
Yep.
And so, at the state level, looking for housing for people, you have a political pressure that says, no, we don't want to make it easy for people who are retired to just stay in the house that they've been in because they're comfortable there if they can afford it. We actually would like to see those things turn over, so.
Yep.
As one of the people who's overhoused by that standard and has no desire to move, I'm not anxious to get pushed out, but there's arguments in both directions. So that's that one. And then underneath there were a bunch of other goals that didn't really have any focus areas associated with them on our table. Schedule and hold town meeting vote on zoning changes and disposition of Medfield State Hospital property, done. Begin to implement the final Medfield State Hospital Master Plan, done. Resolve question of water and sewer capacity required to support the redevelopment of the state hospital property, done. Transition responsibility for the redevelopment of the state hospital property from the MSH Master Planning Committee to its successor development committee responsible for initiating action to redevelop the property consistent with the objectives reflected in the state hospital master plan, done. And the only thing that I added down here was the gun range act. I made a comment, the gun range action could also go here instead of
Where you had
further
before.
forward where I put it before.
Yeah.
And then Pete, this is, I think, where your ADU, or what is it, ADU, auxiliary?
accessory dwelling.
Accessory
units,
dwelling unit.
ADU, yep.
So this would be where the accessory dwelling unit, I think this is where it fits the best. But I think we probably want to add one to address that. From there, my computer has died. For those who are heartbroken that you no longer can see my face, it hasn't changed, but my battery died. Goal number 4. So
I'm
we get
changing.
forward to-
It's
Good thing. Did you
Yeah.
bring you just have a better battery than me. That's
I
good.
do. What happens when your hard drive crashes? And you have to buy a new
Yeah,
one?
I used to have a good battery. But, so goal number 4, the last two, goal area 4 and 5, are what I think of as maybe called the more aesthetic areas that we had. They're a little harder they're not financed, they're not building houses. The idea here is to promote the healthy and responsible development of Medfield's youth. So in other words, create a town where the town itself is an asset in the development and growth of our young people. Medfield has always, ever since I've moved here, Medfield has had one of the highest populations of 18 and under of any town in the state. The commitment to education has always been top-notch and has generally been reflected in the performance of the schools, so I think it still does. But there's more than just schools that contribute to why your kids grow up to be the way they are. I can say that speaking from direct knowledge. There's a whole lot more to it than just that. So this was trying to get at that. The first one was to improve the school system's solid performance. And the one objective that we had in here originally was to complete the feasibility study for the replacement of the Dale Street School. I just reworded it to say update the feasibility study for the Dale Street School and develop a revised concept for the new school. So again, thinking of FY23, I think those are the reasonable goals that we have for this upcoming, or this current fiscal year. We're not at the point where we're going to be building a school, I don't think, until probably FY24 is where we'd be entertaining a specific plan.
And anything specific with the schools is out of our jurisdiction.
But this is these are town goals, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, because these are town goals, so school issues are in bounds. They can say they don't like them. This is not our dictate. Think of this as a forum. This is a way to articulate something
Okay.
that anybody in town that sees this as, the wrong thing or leaving stuff out, there's an opportunity to put that in. The whole point of this, kind of to the point that you're talking about, Bob, the whole point of this when we first developed it was to put down in writing what we thought the town wanted to see done. And it's an appropriate level of strategic vision, but that's the whole point. And then when Pete and Mike and I went through, Pete and Mike said, well, we'd like this column of what specifically you were doing. That's how that third column showed up. I didn't have it originally. Second item, support the cultural, physical, emotional, civic development of our children. So the goal that was in there already was implement the Connections program to enforce contact between the town's seniors and the town's youth. That was grant funded, and I put that as in process question mark, because to be honest, I haven't heard very much about that. So do we actually have it? Did we get the grant? Is it still going on, and is it really worthy of staying on the list? I'm not sure. And then I threw, again, trying to be a little creative here, Medfield Outreach Action here as follow-up. So Medfield Outreach has done a strategic plan that took a look at what the needs of the town were that are related to Medfield Outreach. The question I have here is, should we have some goal in here that kind of would be driven by the insights of Medfield Outreach around the things that we need to do to address the general area that we're talking about?
Well, and what I found missing in here is we never even call out, we know that the Park and Rec building is dilapidated, so we're not really calling out anything as a goal to address the Park and Rec situation in terms of either trying to expand programs. We know we have, so ahead of Park and Rec back in 2004, 2005 timeframe, I mean, I still have the spreadsheet at home where we talked about where we could drive revenue with the right structure, with the right program, so is that a goal
We have a school as a goal. Maybe it'd be nice if you could draft what you'd like to say, but
okay.
I would say that's a Parks and Rec facility. We can add
I
that.
think that's a
I
sorely.
mean, it's probably, again, what's the right goal for FY '23 with regard to a Parks and Rec facility? So it's not build one, it's gonna
Right.
be doing something logical, but I'll add that in there. Third item, provide appropriate opportunities for the town's young people to observe and participate in town governance. The goal that was there was to work with the school department and the town departments to assess the potential for identifying opportunities for town youth to get involved with town operations, with the goal of promoting a deeper appreciation of the importance of a citizen-led local government. And I just wrote down on that one, I'm not sure what the current status of that is. Christine, if you're thinking of goals, that might actually
Love that one.
be one that you do want to add. And I'm thinking this is not just, let's take someone on that's a burden, so you can just watch what's going on. I'm thinking that there's opportunities for the youth in town to actually be involved with, I mean, they do get involved with some stuff. Boy Scouts get involved with stuff, so it's not, I don't want to ignore everything that's going on, but there might be some ways to expand that a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then I said, what else? I threw fire department cadet program, the police department internships, possibly town hall internships, where I'm thinking internships might be a little more formal in their nature than other things. But I remember, I never did follow up with Chief Garrett. It was a year and a half ago. I remember she came to a Board of Selectmen meeting. And the reason I remember it so well is she came in and said, I got contacted by another town who has a student who would benefit if he would be allowed to work with the police department. I don't know if that ever happened.
did.
It did happen.
Yep.
Good.
Split his time between the police department and the town hall, and it was fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That was a case where it wasn't even a Medfield youth. My sense was, reading between the lines, this was somebody that really would benefit from that, and so we said, sure, go for it. And I'm glad to hear it worked out well,
Very
but
great.
I'm guessing that that's not the last person who would benefit from that kind of thing, so. So I added that to see if there was anything else that we should do to expand that goal.
So,
Committee has a representative that comes in for the school. So I'm wondering how we could get a student that comes in and is a representative to the school to us. I mean, to like, what's going on with the youth, right? So it's one way to start engaging and having somebody say, what do you do? Oh, I go on the Tuesday nights, I listen to what's going on. That person then gets a better understanding, and, one person tells another person, who tells another person. Are you nudging her? Is this an insider?
No. It's just, I think of politically oriented people like Lee and Dewey, who is, lived, breathed politics and would have loved an opportunity. And I think it's a great idea.
Is there any thought about granting 16-year-olds the right to vote for town elections? Because some towns in Massachusetts have gone that route, and
You can do that.
Haven't considered, short answer, is there any thought of going to, no?
because I find 18-year-olds at that point, they are thinking college, they're not thinking town anymore. I think when they're sophomores, 16-year-olds, there's a little bit more space in their timetable, in their brain to get involved and maybe spend some time and get onto that bandwagon. And that's also, they're doing government and they're doing a push or whatever they're doing,
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear the townspeople's overall reaction to that. Given the litmus test is usually people that don't have to pay for the consequences of their financial voting aren't necessarily always welcome to vote, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the thought.
There might be an opportunity to tap into Girls' State and Boys' State, because that's, this is a contingent of students.
Yeah.
I don't know if
But
that's
what's
still
a-
happening. It didn't happen last year.
Girl, it didn't happen, was that because of COVID?
Yeah, I know that my kids probably would.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could talk to Judy Doucette and Eileen DeSorga and see.
I'd be interested, yeah.
Yeah, because that's a natural cohort of students who get involved with civic engagement. It's a selective procedure, and they might be something that they could tap into.
I mean, those are the kids you want going home and talking to their parents, like, are you aware of? And they're like, no. Like,
Well, a lot of the alumni who did the Girls' State or the Boys' State are in the service sector,
good.
working for various government institutions.
So this was an area in which I was very concerned about the fact that we didn't really have anything that's very definite, it feels a little imprecise to me, I guess, and it's an area that concerns me a lot, because what we heard recently from youth outreach was that the mental health needs of the youth in town have increased dramatically. We hear that through media everywhere, that the problems of the youth are mental issues are much more than they used to be.
But we don't know why.
Well,
We need root cause, that's the problem.
yeah, I think that, we have the Metro West Adolescent Youth Survey that says that they're feeling incredibly stressed. They're using a lot of alcohol, they're using a lot of marijuana, both of which we know are bad for the development of their brains. The brains, we now know, of people don't really mature until they're in their mid-20s, and that at the earlier that you start using alcohol, your risk of becoming addicted to alcohol just increases dramatically. So that we should be trying to figure out ways as a town to help these kids grow up into more as responsible people as we can. So, I think the youth outreach is asking us basically to spend more money on the issue. That's problematic. One of the ideas that I heard some school do recently, because I think that social media is a real problem for kids growing up today. I think it's just very difficult to deal with social media if you're a teenager. And I read about some school that doesn't allow the kids to have their phones during the day, and I thought, man, what a great idea. At least, there's a 7-hour block of time when you're not going to be worried about what's on WhatsApp or whatever I don't even know what the right ones are.
TikTok.
So, I don't even think that's it. I think it's the one that disappears, whatever, the Instagram.
Oh,
is.
Snapchat.
Snapchat.
You're right, it's TikTok, it was taken off like that. You're right, you're hip, Gus. You're hip.
Always have been.
So I don't know what to do about that. But, so that was just my general reaction, that this was just
Oh,
sort
we
of
can talk to
wishy-
Kathy.
it wasn't very precise.
Yeah.
So when we first drafted this, I was sensitive to that, and as an engineer, I guess I'm supposed to be totally concrete, but as a left-hander, then maybe not so much. But when we first drafted this, and I had my own kids that were going through school, and I said, what is it about this town that makes it different? You know, there were some of the things that came to mind, and these are focused on school stuff, but I also would say, I had kids that were in Boy Scouts, and if you read the current, I get the Troop 89 newsletter, and you read what's being written there, you find it there too. It's that all the things in life, when I was growing up, the most meaningful things that I ever had in life that have had the biggest impact on who I became, that had the most unique impacts on what I was, not a single one of them involved me buying something or paying for something. And most of them came unexpectedly, and they came with sophistication. With evidence that somebody had thought something through that was so subtle in the thought process. The thing that came out is not subtle. You know, the meals that take place at Rocky Woods in elementary school, that's not subtle. The Victory Garden's not subtle. The bike ride, I don't think they even do this anymore, but the bike ride, the historic tour, that's not subtle. The canoeing on the Charles River, those are not things that fall into the book and the standard stuff. Heck, for that matter, Medfield Day. They show something that a kid growing up that will make an impression on them. Now, they're not all going to figure it out, and they're not all going to be perfect in their lives, but it's that stuff that I was trying to get at, and by definition, as you point out, Pete, it's kind of a little fuzzy. I'm not sure exactly what those things are that we need, we should be saying, but I'm not sure all of them are going to get buttoned down, but I take your point that it's a little bit ethereal, and be happy for either a more comprehensive ethereal or a more concrete ethereal supporting to figure out what to say.
So one of the things that I made that sort of rose to the top for me out of the master plan was the sense of community of the town, and that maybe gets into a little bit about what you're talking about there. That it's those experiences. I mean, Medfield Day is one of those experiences that is certainly unique to Medfield, but it's a memorable experience.
Heck, even opening day of baseball season.
Yeah.
Well, and you think about, but to be fair, even on Medfield Day, somebody may not be at Medfield Day because they're experiencing their soccer, their field hockey, their whatever. So there's certain age groups where that Saturday is all game day. Their club wherever, but that's their experience, right?
But they're going to get something out of being at that soccer game.
Exactly.
My youngest son, early on when he was learning lacrosse, he had some great experiences with a hard-nosed lacrosse coach, and it's good for people not to be sitting there talking about how hard the ball's coming. It's like you're playing the game. So there's a lot of stuff that's good.
No doubt.
But you're right, Pete. Some of it's ethereal. So if you have words for things you'd like to add there, Pete, you can put some thought. I picked up the Park and Rec facility for sure. And I think we have to get there may be a couple other things to talk about there.
Yeah, but whether it's Park and Rec programs or some, what can we do to help in that area? Because I feel like that's under-delivered right there.
Goal 5, Medfield's a unique town because of its character, history, and heritage, built upon the principles, ideals, and values of the country. It's tricky. In today's world, this is tough. Because when you start talking the values and the ideals of our culture, you have to go forward.
Oh, sorry.
When you start
Get
talking
me.
about
I
the
get so
values
intense
and
when you say
ideals of our culture, we have a counter messaging that in some ways threatens the validity of it can threaten the validity. And as a town, we have to sort of figure out how to navigate and how to be articulate about what the real values and ideals are that are actually everlasting or at least can withstand the criticisms, the challenges around the edges, and figure out how to do it. I think we do a better job of that than a lot of places do. And I don't say that as an arrogant, well, so we just need to stay the way we always were in 1930. It's not that. It's that you got to understand what these things have, what the value actually is of these things, and understand how to cling to that and promote that. And maybe our kids will, you know, live in the bubble like they say they live in. But you know what? If you live in the bubble, you can see what the possibilities are. Then you go out in the world and you see it's not like that, but you don't lose sight of what it could be. And you know, I think maybe you don't lose your idealism so easily. So that's the spirit here. So the first one, preserving, protecting the town's character, understanding its history and its historical cultural resources. This one I left it the way it was. Rationalize responsibilities between this is actually a maintenance thing. Rationalize responsibilities between DPW, Parks and Rec, and the school department to maintaining natural town assets, including parks, athletic fields, building grounds, and other maintained open space. Make appropriate adjustments to department maintenance budgets to reflect adjustments and responsibilities. This thing showed up when I was early in my campaign to get clear responsibilities for maintaining open space. You might all take a look at that and say, well, maybe this isn't the exact right place to have this relative to where it goes. So you might want to move it. I was just trying to get it pegged into this plan somewhere because I was frustrated even back in FY19 at how we just don't.
Well,
Yeah, we have this this kind of chaotic allocation of responsibilities.
Well, and I don't disagree, because what was my biggest pet peeve has been the tennis courts at the high school. And like some way, shape, or form, they went from being new to crap. And like, how did they get so bad? I walked it the other night, and the cracks are like this wide. I mean, there's no way you can play tennis on those tennis courts. No way. The ball, like, if it comes close to the edge of the net, forget about it. Well, the nets are crap anyways. So I look at that and I think, how did it get that bad? When the basketball court right next to it is not, then there are guys on it every night, and it's not bad. So when I was reading this, I'm like, okay, do we have a list of, we prioritize, whether it's school, whether it's Parks and Rec, areas that need to be addressed? Because what a waste. We have 2 tennis courts on the school grounds, and the kids can't even use them. They have to go over to the Metacomet Park. That's just crazy.
So anyway, that's where it is now. If you want to move it, that's great, but let's not lose it.
No, I'd like to
Second
take a
item,
list.
support environmental protection efforts and promote the public's responsible use of our natural resources. First part was town administrator to coordinate with the DPW head to develop a public tree inventory and tree planting plan. And that was the one I actually marked down. Christine, should this be on Christine's goal list? Does Sarah, so Sarah's been doing some stuff around inventorying open space. I think
She's
you
doing
told-
trails.
So
Yeah,
she's doing
she's working on
trails, okay.
trails. So I think in terms of a public tree inventory and tree planting plan, you're gonna need an appropriation. That's something we can talk about. We don't have anybody on staff who can do a legitimate, public tree inventory. There are some grants available, and we can seek those out as well, but,
So up at the state hospital, we own it, obviously today, but even when it's done, the main road that goes up, right in front of the cottages, like there is a tree, I must have snapped. Did you see the size branch that snapped? It's huge. That tree looks like it's completely rotted. Who goes around and flags those and says, okay, if we're gonna cut down a tree, let's replace the tree?
the tree warden.
Okay, because that one right there, that should be roped off with a yellow, I mean, that tree does not look good, and those limbs are huge.
Up at the hospital, John Thompson
Yeah, I was
keeps
gonna
an eye
say,
on a lot
Is
of
that-
trees,
I think it's the one that's doing it up there.
and he's ordered some trimming of trees up there.
And he'll call Ed Hinckley and have us work through our tree contract that we have in the DPW.
Okay, and I'd like to think that if we take one down, because a couple of them that are stumps up there right now, we know we've taken one down, we know we're gonna replace it, we're not just gonna, I'd like to think that's what we do.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, Chris, it's a big,
No,
Tree.
people have been sending me pictures of it.
yeah. And it's on the land we're keeping,
Yes.
so it's our tree.
That was my first question when the pictures came in.
And so, the only thing, where would we put in here, I would think we would, is we have sustainability goals that we've laid out for 2030 and then trying to mirror the state. Would we as a town, I mean, this is selectmen goals, but it's still a town goals, where would we put something like
These
that
are
to make
actually
sure?
town goals.
So town goals, okay,
These
we're
are town
responsible for,
goals,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm looking right across, at Megan Hilly, and I'm like, okay, we're kind of missing something here where we should at least make sure if we're trying to achieve,
It's on the end of my list, Eileen, to add the
okay.
climate action plan goals to
Okay.
the list of town goals.
And it's just, it's,
That's probably where it goes. We talk about support environmental protection efforts, so that's the broad category.
yeah,
Well, you want me to respond right away?
that, yeah,
So I would argue actually to add an additional goal, number 6, that is sustainability, because we're talking here about historical character and culture, but you know, the environment, the sustainability, the future of this town is really a separate goal and should be listed as a separate goal, defined as a separate goal. And then, of course, we do have already plans in place or in progress that would address that. That's the master plan and the Town of Medfield Climate Action Plan that's shortly forthcoming. So in those lists specific objectives, goals, actions that, you know, that can be addressed by, you know, the relevant committees, departments, and by Christine and by the Board of Selectmen. You know, as co-chair of the Energy Committee, I would strongly recommend that we list sustainability as a separate goal beyond climate action. You know, that obviously climate action and climate goals are part of it. And to me, it's kind of a little bit of a no-brainer, because since this plan was done last year in a town meeting, the town voted nearly unanimously to support the climate action goal, the climate goals of the state. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be listed since it's been adopted at town meeting.
So I'll tell you why, the way you just expressed it, I have a problem with it, although I don't have a problem. I think you may be right. I'm looking at what we've written. I think I would agree that it would make sense to put a 6th goal in here. And I might even ask you to draft it, if you'd like to. I'm happy to
Hear
write it,
that.
but I think it would be better, it might be better if you collect, not just you, but
Yeah.
the group collectively did it. Here's the caution that I would have if I were writing it. A lot of times when we talk sustainability, we're talking about sustainability like bridges not washing out and roads not washing out. I would make the broad goal our commitment to sustaining our environment. So it's a little, you know, if you look at the things,
Yeah.
if you look at the things at the end of this that are ethereal, we're talking about sustaining the culture, you know, sustaining the things that make Medfield what it is. And as I read through those, you're right. There's not anything that really specifically talks about, there's a few indirect things about preserving natural resources. But in terms of thinking about the living environment that we have here in Medfield, and thinking about it as sustaining that environment, that would be, I think, the top level goal. Because my issue with a lot of this is, I think Megan's heard from me before, is that there's this focus on carbon, except we got issues with water. We have issues with species protection. We have, so the big picture is all of it.
Absolutely.
It may be that when we get to the action, I mean, I actually would assume that right now that one of the definite things, at least one of the definite things that would be in the right-hand column would be something that's appropriate around what the TOMCAP, what progress you anticipate getting to, what's the action for FY23 with regard to TOMCAP? Because right now, it's not yet up for approval. It doesn't yet have any kind of price tags on actions and things like that. So we're actually gonna do something. We have to get down to brass tacks. And as it was proposed, when it first came up before the town meeting, was the idea that they've got to come back and give you that plan to take a look at and approve, which I think that's probably the thing that makes sense in FY23, is to get that together so that the town can actually take a look at it at the annual town meeting and know what they're signing up for.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the way we are looking at it right now is because we need to progress so quickly, and we have been working with the town to make progress.
But there are no blank checks, Hilly.
No, there are no blank checks, but
Okay.
it is absolutely, and we agreed that every proposal would be reviewed, you know, for the financial benefit and the total cost analysis.
But there are, you know, there's other issues like PFAS, and you know,
Right.
we're actually dealing with and in fairness, this raises an interesting question. You all are an energy committee, and Megan, less so you, because at least you've got environmental action in the name of the private groups. I'm actually making the argument for the environmental perspective of which energy is just a piece.
Absolutely.
So if you're okay with that, then that's good, but we have to keep in mind water resources without a doubt. Personally, I think there's some species, there's probably some smart things we could do that would contribute to the preservation of species, if nothing short, if it was only getting more people to put in pollinator gardens. I counted,
Or fewer people to
I had
use
one monarch
mosquito
butterfly and
sprays.
three tiger swallowtails, that's
Yeah.
all this year.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
it's not as many as
I
we-
agree, that's actually what I wrote down, it's water, it's sustainable landscaping, it's pollinator, it's waste, it's chemical use around the garden,
Mhm.
biodiversity, you could even use invasive species, all of that
Right.
should be
Yeah.
part
So
of that. And I don't know how to address that sort of as a next step, whether there's a committee or a staff member that, would be put in to supervise that and coordinate across departments and committees.
Yeah, I don't know that it's something that gets coordinated across departments so much as, I don't know.
Right.
But it may have more to do with with that ethereal stuff that we're trying to teach our kids. Maybe there's some ethereal stuff we're trying to teach our adults, and so it's not a town department issue, it's actually a community issue. So I would agree, I think I'm good with having a sixth area. I think you're right, that's underrepresented in here. The only thing I'd like us to be thinking about the whole enchilada when it comes to
Right.
environment.
Absolutely, and that's why I said sustainability, because, we think carbon reduction is a main issue, because if we don't get that under control, nothing else seems to matter that much. But it's obviously a very wide area of problems we're facing. And what I wanted to say about the youth too, I think with the town taking the lead and showing the kids that they have agency if they wanted to get involved, I think that's a really important piece of giving them something less to worry about. Some ability to actually get involved and take action, or see somebody else model action. And whether that's the town, whether that's their adults, whether it's the school, just show to them that they have agency.
This town through its actions, I don't disagree with you. The way I've always looked at it is this town through its actions tells all its youth that the town cares about them. So to your point, to the extent the town could send a clearer message that not only does the town, meaning everybody that lives here, cares about them, but the town government cares about them too. I like that. So,
Oops, I'll read that.
let's see. This is a comment from Fred Davis. I don't see any mention of the overall townwide master plan. Well, you said it was completed. Additionally, I don't see Medfield's climate action plan. Oh, he wrote this 924. It's not, it's 924. I'll let you discuss the climate action plan. Zero mention of climate, carbon, energy. He was busy writing this and not listening to what The word environment shows up twice, specifically mentioning taking care of trees. Trees are good. So is responsible use of our natural resources and support and protect, maintain attractive open space acquisitions to enhance recreational opportunities, to maintain the open character of the town. If that is a sum total of environmental perspective, it is 10 to 20 years behind the times. No mention of responsibility about waste, for instance. That's a good add. Waste is something I didn't mention. Or health effects from combustion. Well, we didn't talk about that, but it wouldn't just be combustion. It might be a bunch of chemicals and other things. And no evidence of awareness of the fiscal responsibility of investing in solar and energy efficiency, which already netted the town many millions of dollars. Then Medfield's incentives to both decarbonize buildings and go solar recently increased dramatically and will soon be increasing by an additional 30% with the new federal IRA. So partly we did, while he was writing this, we were talking about all these things, but to Fred's point, I think a lot of his comments understandably are focused on energy, decarbonization, that's fine. I think especially for some of the things that he's talking about around incentives and getting people to embrace good things, I can see an appropriate action. It's, again, in that right-hand column, maybe TomCap is one thing. There may be other pieces that need to go in there around educating, introducing things that make solid sense. I think there's no problem with having more than one action that's in that area to promote sustainability.
So one of the other things that I would mention that might fit under this sustainability area is the control of the invasive species that are around town. I mean, I noticed a huge array of black swallowwort on the Montrose property today. I was just kind of shocked to see how much they had, and I'm sure they don't know that it's there. But if the town somehow could educate property owners about how to deal with some of these invasive species, and
Drought
maybe we
took
could-
over my garden mustard, that's for sure. I can hardly find it now.
Just one additional point on the first, on that goal 5, the historic character piece. Just a consideration about maybe putting something in there about supporting the historic district commission and the historic commission on possible bylaw changes. I just know from sitting in the last meeting that they're struggling with some, looking at the demolition delay bylaw and wanting to maybe make some updates to it.
So what I prefer, if you're talking to them, rather, I don't know what it means when we say we're gonna support them about changes they wanna make. I think you get support for specific changes, so the action would be for them to, if we carry certain actions that say if the Historic District Commission wants to review wants to review the demolition bylaw, I don't mind putting that as an action, that they're gonna do that, and then when they come in with a change,
Okay.
we'd know that would be probably the way to do that. I'm just not sure exactly what they had, that you mentioned that, so I know about that. But
Yeah, yeah.
I think the concrete action is a thing as opposed to general support for something that
I
we're
just
gonna
didn't
find out.
want to
what
speak
they-
for them tonight
Yeah,
after
no, that's
listening
fine,
to-
but
listening
if
to
you're
their
gonna be talking to them
meeting.
more, I think that's, the point again is this was supposed to be a forum for people to put in what they thought, not a dictate coming down from the Board of Selectmen. It's just that in the early years, there were only a few comments. So it sort of felt like it was coming down from on high. Sure.
That you could add
Fun.
to goal 5.
Yeah.
You know what we're coming up on? Not too distant future will
It's
be
a
the
loaded
375th anniversary of the town.
Okay.
And if I did my math right,
That's
I think I joined the committee in 1998, which then put us back, well, if it's 98, then it's 2023. If it was 99, then it's 2024. But anyway, just something to start thinking about, because that would definitely be our heritage
Yeah,
and that kind of stuff, so.
I like that.
And it's fun.
I think Megan just formed the first committee.
We're gonna be gun shy to make recommendations if that's how we follow it up.
He's not gone. He's still writing those columns. He weighs in. All right.
I think we're good.
We're good?
Would you like Lily to draft something for you?
Well,
Number 6?
certainly on number 6, if you're willing to do it, I'm willing.
You want to take it up at
We
your
were
meeting
hoping
on
to
the
take it up in
27th?
2 weeks. I'm more than happy to, if, I'm mainly asking you because I'm thinking you have some idea in mind of what you would like to cover, so rather than me trying to read your mind or something, that's good, but I'm more than happy to sit down and bat things back and forth.
You want it in a short form like this?
I mean, you can see that some boxes we filled out, some boxes we didn't fill out. The original format was simply key focus areas and long-term goals. And then when Pete and Mike got involved in the conversation, said, well, but we ought to talk about what we're really gonna do. That's how that right-hand column got there. The table structure had more to do with just the way to capture it on the page. It wasn't like, the structure of the table wasn't intended to be driving anything. So if you get the idea of focus areas, long-range goals, and specific things, fill in whatever boxes make sense. And again, I'm more, I suspect all 3 of us are more than happy. We're not dumping it on you. It's just that it's probably the good starting point. Okay. Seeing as you're co-chair of the Medfield Energy Committee. All right. Are there any other questions, comments?
Right.
be allowed to be thinking about this for the next 2 weeks, so we can bring this back up.
Thanks for doing it.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, sure.
This was great. Listen, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah.
I've been reading it and was kind of
I w-
curious about the background, so I
I
learned.
kind
a
of
lot.
wish that we sat on it for like several years. I kind of wish we had started this before. It's good discussion.
Well, I think you were on a good trajectory, and then like everything else that we were working on,
That's
COVID
true,
hit, and
yeah.
that kind of
The
paused
worst of it
everything.
is-
Well, and I think to stay true to this, at the end of each selectmen's meeting or once a month, we should be going back saying, where are we at? So it's not all of a sudden, 10 months from tonight, we're like, okay. well,
Right.
I mean, it's
Right. Yeah.
just to keep it out, center up.
Might be quarterly, but.
Okay, cool. I mean, something, just so that it doesn't become this,
Right.
oh my goodness,
Right.
that's not gonna happen.
Right.
So,
Certainly gets you what Bob was talking about, like here's
Yeah.
here's sort of what we're big picture thinking of, if you put that as a framework to get Medfield TV and everything else, just sort of, I mean, it's a great framework.
I think what you did tonight was a great start.
Yeah.
Because I really do think you got some, and I'm not sure how many people are participating or listening. But I think what you started, what's been started here, in my, and I don't want to, it's too late, but you know, what I rounded back to, the end of the conversation is what do we envision the town to be? Right? Building on a culture, but knowing it's changing.
Right.
And candidly, it comes back to, Gus, what you started with, which is, you know, the profile of the town from a tax base, all right? And each one of these conversations has, I'll put my accounting hat on, cost implications, right? And trade-offs. And I think what you mentioned earlier about the downtown, you know, builds into that. So just what's our vision of the downtown? Because even tonight, that conversation you had, it's expanded from where I was on the minds. But, you know, like I said, it infringes upon a neighborhood, or perhaps it doesn't, perhaps there's development opportunities. So I thought that it was a broad conversation that brought up as many questions as answers, but it gets it on the table, which is, I think, is very positive. So I appreciate it, and thanks for your time.
well, and I'm gonna say something, because friends of mine caught this when we had the meeting at the Medfield Library, at the high school library. And being the by far the rookie here at the table, is people really need to understand, we can't talk outside of this table, right? So this conversation, I couldn't pull you aside, you know, when you got back from San Francisco to say, hey, you know what, can we talk about this? And hey, Pete, I saw you. So to me, this is a pure conversation to the town, that we're starting this conversation, we're not ending it. So now you've seen the three of us have this dialogue. I absolutely positively welcome anyone who might watch this on YouTube, someone that's watching it now, to say, okay, wait, I have another idea for you, or could you think of the following? Because we can't do this behind closed doors. And you know, a couple of weeks ago at the Selectmen's meeting, I thought about why not have 5. I've now learned I like 3. I like making sure that people realize that we are very, very, very transparent. What you see here is what's going on. And there's nothing being done behind closed doors that when we get here, we've already made decisions. Absolutely not the case. So, like, I kind of figured you might take the lead tonight, so I'm glad you did this.
That is the tricky part, when you can't talk ahead of time. It's like, okay, we're gonna go into a wide open discussion for a couple hours. Let me put this together. If there's nothing else there, then this would, and I wasn't sure, we might have each had our own version of this, which would have been a harder processing thing. But that part is tricky, figuring out how to, you know, basically integrate information real time in a live meeting. Or you have to have multiple meetings so you can kind of run it through the washing machine 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah,
Can I
so-
say, while we're giving kudos, of almost any committee in town, I think whether I agree or disagree on certain items, I respect that the selectmen do exactly what you do, that you disagree, that you vet. These are complicated issues. Everything we're facing, from the environment to education to municipal funding, if it's all just a rubber stamp and everyone's happy, 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 something's wrong. We're not thinking. So to get the best decision, having you all argue with different points of view is incredibly valuable. It synthesizes a lot of good information from a lot of different perspectives. So I, almost to anyone I talk to, I mentioned the selectmen as being sort of the example of, first of all, never cutting people off. You know, you let us, even, and you mentioned this at the last meeting, almost to a detriment, but you listen to it. and that feels respected and listened to, and then you emulate that behavior with each other. So thank you for leading our town.
We have problems in this country, and part of them are because instead of knowing how to have discussions about issues, they're tied, the issue and the position becomes a judgment of the person. And we can go hammer and tong on the issues, but Pete, I've been here now 5 years, and you and I have gone at it a few times, but that's not a personal, that's not a personal thing. And each one of us, I find it kind of fascinating, because each one of us has a different basic perspective, and then what, I was just talking with somebody about you being the newest person, and the point is, each one of us actually has a portion of the Medfield network, and there are three, they overlap, but they are actually three different centers of gravity. So if, a three-person board running a, executive branch of a 13,000 person town is gonna come close to kind of actually figuring out how to do that, those multiple different centers of gravity are invaluable. It makes a big difference. So the only thing is, we have long meetings. So as much as it might be good that we're here, thank you all for being here. It's more fun when there's certain members of the public that show up. It's nothing worse than having one of these meetings. And it's not that I don't like meetings, but staring at a room full of empty chairs, it's not as much fun. But,
Yeah,
it's
thank
great
you.
that you all came out.
Thank you very much.
I guess we have to officially,
I don't know,
close the
Yeah, you
meeting.
have to close the meeting,
Yeah,
yes.
we gotta close
Yep,
the
yep.
meeting.
Do you,
Move to
I didn't know we
last
officially
chance,
opened.
Going once, twice. Motion,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. See you next week.